right, welcome everyone. Of course, you know, Mayor Walker, and I'm conducting today. So welcome to our June League of Cities and Towns meeting. Since we don't have one in July, this one has the chance, it looks like, to go an entire 3 hours. So strap in for much great business that we're going to do. We would like, the second item on the agenda is a review and approval of the minutes, meeting minutes from last meeting, and conflict of interest disclosure from members of our board that have any conflicts they need to disclose. Let's do the conflicts first. Anybody have a conflict they need to bring to our attention? All right, great. Now, motion to approve minutes. All right, we have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Let's do the general votes, right? All in favor of approval of the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? I see no opposed. The minutes have been approved. Item 3 is a public hearing. It's our fiscal year 2025 approved tentative budget. And so who's taking that?
So Nick, logistically,
Nick?
Yes, so we will just need to, I do not see any members of the public online. And I don't see any, except for Dr. Ramore here.
Actually, we have one member of the public. Hope, raise your hand.
I'm gonna make a motion to open the public hearing on that tentative budget for next year.
Hope is my favorite city councilwoman's daughter, most favorite city councilwoman. And she is following me around a little bit, trying to see all the crazy stuff I do. Anyway, all right, we have a motion by.
Troy. I said a day in the life of Troy. That's pretty fun.
Scary for her, yeah. Yes. We have a motion by Mayor Silverstream to open the public hearing. All right, all in favor of opening the public hearing on the 2025 budget, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, seeing no opposed, then we're in the public hearing. So we're new from the public that'd like to address our committee on our budget. All right, seeing no public wanting to do it here, no one's online.
Nope, we do not have any online.
All right, we'll close the public hearing. And then go ahead on, do you have a presentation you wanted to make, or were you good?
That is just on the tentative budget that we went over last time. And then the next item will be approval of the budget resolution. So we can do the presentation on the budget during that.
All
I'll
right,
make a motion to close the public hearing.
thank you, Mayor. Second?
Second.
All right, we have a motion to second to close the public hearing. All in favor of closing the public hearing, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none opposed, public hearing is closed. Go ahead.
Nick, before we jump into item number 4, I want to just take a moment and welcome everybody to the league office and thank those of you, or thank all of you for taking a significant amount of time, as Mayor Walker indicated, for the board meeting today. We will not meet in July. So this will be the last time we see you until school starts. But into June. I know, this summer flies by quick. Summer flies by quickly.
No wonder your kids ain't changed.
That's right. That's right. But thank you for making the time to be here. And some of you have traveled quite a bit to get here in person. And for some of you, I think this is your first time in the board office or in the league office. So thank you for coming in order to accommodate the in-person training and workshop that we'll have with Dr. Ramore later during the board meeting. There are several board members who are not here, who are either traveling for work or for pleasure. There are we actually have board members in several different states and countries right this very moment. We reached out to all of them individually to let them know that they could call into the first part of this meeting when we're doing the budget. Because that is board business and wanted to make sure they had the opportunity to do so. So you'll see Mayor Johnson's online for this first portion of the meeting. The training with Dr. Ramore is all in person, which is why we're doing the meeting this way. But I wanted you to know, we did make that invitation to the other board members to be able to call in. And we checked with them to see if there was anything else they wanted to make sure that you all knew about the budget before you deliberated on the final budget today. The second thing related to that is after the workshop with Dr. Ramore, the key objective for today is to get some general direction from the board on several different policy items that are moving forward through the Commission on Housing Affordability, because their subgroups have already started meeting and have several meetings this week. We've also told the board members who were unable to join us in person today that we'll be sending the same survey that we'll be sharing with you later in this meeting. We'll be doing the Carson, are we doing Qualtrics or Slido? So we'll be doing a Qualtrics survey during this meeting for you. They will ask you to fill out during this meeting, but we'll also send it out to the entire board. So that way, if after you fill it out today, you go back and talk to your city manager or city attorney and want to update it, you're welcome to do so. And the board members who are not here in person today will also have the chance to fill that out so that we get that general direction. Because as I mentioned, we are already in some of those subgroup meetings. So we really have three sections of the board meeting today. We have the operations and administration piece we're doing now, which includes the consideration and approval of the final budget for next year. We'll have the workshop with Dr. Amore, and then the third of the meeting will be on those advocacy, that advocacy direction. We have lunch out in the foyer, so please eat as we meet here. That also goes for lead staff. And then we will, please also feel free to get up and use the bathrooms. For those who have not been in the building before, there are bathrooms on both this level and the upstairs level, just out the door in the back. And then we also will likely just take a quick stretch break after the workshop. So people can stretch their legs before we finish up the meeting. So thank you in advance for the 3-hour meeting. We try not to do these, but in order to accommodate everything on the agenda, this is what we have to do. So thanks. So Mayor, with that as the overview, I'd like to turn it to Nick to walk through the budget for consideration.
Great, thank you, Cam. As you can see in your packet, we do have the memo that we had at our May 20th meeting, along with the tentative budget there. I will briefly just go through some highlights on that. There are no changes from the tentative budget that we passed in May to this budget that we're bringing forward to you for our final budget in June. So we have a budget for fiscal year 2025 of $5,343,895. This is a decrease from the current year budget, FY24, 3.66%. In general revenue, we have an increase of $55,000. That's about 1.5% increase over the FY 2024 budget. As you remember, in January, the board voted to reduce two of the 3 rates that make up our dues formula. That is the population rate and the property tax rate, and then voted to maintain the sales tax rate. That equated to a 4% or $100,000 increase in dues revenue. We will have a significant decrease to our conference revenue, registration revenue, because of the changes we've made to the annual convention, going from a 2.5-day conference to a 2-day conference. We're going to reduce, we don't expect turnout to reduce, but we are going to reduce those rates accordingly. So that kind of shakes out from the $100,000 increase to the decrease and the $55,000 overall increase. For our grant and special project revenue, if you remember, we are wrapping up the luau is now being transferred over to the Office of the Property Rights Ombudsman. We are wrapping up Your Land, Your Plan public access grant, and also the ARPA assistance program we implemented in 2021. Both Your Land, Your Plan and ARPA assistance have a small amount left over that you'll see in the 2025 budget that we will completely close out in the coming year. Personnel, onto expenses. Personnel expenses, we have an increase of $150,500, or a little over 8%. That factors in both market and merit and COLA increases for staff. And then you'll see in operations and engagement expenses, we have a decrease of $13,000, roughly just under 2% decrease there. Event expenses, like I mentioned, we have a $90,000 decrease here as well, and that is just because we're going to decrease how much it costs to attend. Ultimately, this is the exact same budget that you passed in May. We are required to adopt our budget via resolution. So you will see here a resolution that we'll bring before you. And do we need to, Jared, do we need to read that aloud, or do we need to just have it here for everyone to see?
Have it here for everyone.
Okay, great. Basically says, we have done every step required of us as an interlocal in order to adopt a budget. and all of those whereases. And then now therefore be it resolved that we adopt the budget and that I am authorized to certify a copy of this budget and file it with the auditor as required. And so we, as staff, we would ask for the board to adopt this resolution and therefore adopt our fiscal year 2025 budget.
Got a motion to adopt.
I'll second it.
Second,
I'll second it.
all right. All in favor of adopting the 2025 budget, say aye.
Aye.
Well, ayes, will any opposed? Seeing no opposed, the budget is adopted. Five, this is the budget report and check register for July 2023 through May 2024. Nick, you got that as well.
Excellent. You'll see in your packets, yes, what we're calling the Q3 plus, because we're going through May financial report. This is all but 1 month left in the fiscal year. I'll run through this quickly. For membership dues, not a whole lot of changes since the last time we reported, but for membership dues, we are just over 100% collected by the end of this period. That is because we budgeted in anticipation of 99% of municipalities participating. So we're just over 100 there. Sponsorship revenue, sponsors and donations, they account for about 10% of our annual budget, and we have collected about 104% of that so far this year. And you'll see in that fiscal year 2025 budget, we've increased what we're budgeting in that category accordingly. Also with registration fees and exhibitor space, that is 17% of our revenue in our core revenue, and we're about 104% of that as well. One thing I am particularly excited about, if you remember the Q1 report, we were lower in our annual convention revenue than we had anticipated. That is because we are the week of Labor Day, and we're going to have that again this year. So we expect attendance to be similar. The year after that, we're going to move, thankfully, we're kind of at the mercy of the Salt Palace, but we're going to move to the end of September. So initially, we thought mid-year looked the same as it normally does. We collect about 90% of that revenue. Luckily, we broke records for both attendance and revenue at mid-year, and that got our total registration up to about 99%. So I was pretty happy about that. Moving on, local administrative advisor grant, that is on and running. No changes really here. We will be submitting our final report to GOPB this month, and then we will receive the remaining 10% of that grant. As a reminder, that is mostly pass-through revenue in which we sub-grant it to the AOGs in order to fund a position in their organization to serve as a local administrator.
Yeah, can I add a couple quick things about local
Absolutely.
administrative advisor? We just advertised the position for the other league appointment within that program. Gary Watcott had been serving in that role. Then when he passed away in January, we wanted to get through the session, get through spring training and get feedback from all the AOGs of what they would like in that role. So Liam Threlkill is still one of our 2 staffers there. And now we've posted what we're looking for in that position. And so if you know of anyone who's interested or could be a potential fit, let us know. We've already received several applications for it and hope to have that squared away here in the next few weeks. Molly will reference this later, but in partnership with the local administrative advisors, we're doing our regional meetings over these last few weeks that have been extremely successful. And the National League of Cities has asked us to present on the local administrative advisor to state league directors and staff at 2 different conferences later this summer, because the local administrative advisors, first of its kind in the country. And so there's a lot of interest in it. And now that we've got a year under our belt, I think we've got a really good story to tell. And the last thing, just anecdotally, I was talking to one of our longstanding city managers who's now departing to serve a mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And I sat down with him and just asked him, before you check out for a few years here, what advice do you have for us as a league? And what are pros, cons, strengths, weaknesses? And he had been participating with us in the local administrative advisor program. And he said that he didn't realize until he got into that program just how big the need was for it. He said, double down on this, do everything you can to keep it going, because in just his little experience, he thought it was one of the most meaningful things he had done in his career. And he's been in city management for 3 decades. So anyway, we're really excited about the work that's been done to date and the possibilities going forward and the interest in the program. And so we think it's state money very well spent.
Absolutely. Thanks, Cam. On to expenditures. We have expended about 81% of what was budgeted so far. Personnel accounts for about 47% of our core budget spending, and we're about 88% of what has been budgeted. Operations and engagement expenses account for 17% of budget expenditures, and we are just over 70% so far this year. Event expenditures make up just over a quarter of our total core expenditures, and with a month remaining in the year, we spent about 86% in that category. And I did mention grants before, we're just under 18% expended there, and that most of those grants, as you can see in the report, they are tied directly to a revenue source that we've already received, and then we recognize, and so it's on our books as a liability, and then we recognize that when the expenditures happen. So those are. Ultimately, with 1 month remaining here, we are $723,113 revenue over expenses. Finances are in great shape. And at this time, we would ask you to approve both this financial report and the check register that we've attached. This check register has all of our checks from March to May in 2024. And we have all of the hard documentation over here in Angela's office. If you have any questions about any specific expenses, we're happy to answer those and grab the documentation as well.
Roger, Jeff Silsman, I make a motion to approve the Q3 budget report and check register.
I'll second it.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor of approval, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All vote aye as well. None opposed, though. I was approved. I'm number 6. Office of the State Auditor Fraud Risk Assessment, FY 2024. Nick, you got that as well.
Excellent. It really is the Nick show. It's all very exciting stuff. So this is actually exciting. This is the fraud risk assessment that we're required every year to approve and submit with the auditor. In years past, we were right at the 355 level, which greater than equals very low, but we were in the low level. This year, the requirements, the licensure requirements of our accountant, they switched up a little bit, and Dave Sanderson, our accountant, has that. So now we are officially at 375 in the very low category with the Office of the State Auditor's fraud risk assessment. Cam and I have reviewed this, and with your approval, we will submit it to the auditor's office.
I'll make that motion that we approve this.
We have a motion, second. All in favor of approval, say aye.
Aye.
Vote aye as well. Any opposed? All right, item 6 is also approved. Item 7, ULCT vacation cash out policy update. Nick.
This is the last item that I have on the agenda, so you'll be done hearing from me here. So,
Are you going on vacation then?
yeah, I'm out of here right after now. I still have to run the computer, so. Great, so we are proposing a change to our vacation time cash out policy. No change to the policy itself, but really just the number, the threshold number of where folks are allowed to cash out. In 2021, the board revamped our paid time off policies to address, we had implemented in 2019 a family medical leave policy. We wanted to define which types of PTO, because we do have vacation and sick separately, which ones can be monetized, and then provide staff with flexibility, and also with sick time, head off any future potential abuse of sick time. So we set up a policy in which sick time has a cap at 400 hours. Anything over that converts to vacation at 50% at the end of the year. No vacation time can be cashed, or excuse me, no sick time can be cashed out. Only vacation time can be cashed out. And that vacation time has a cap of 300 hours, and you are allowed to cash out anything you have banked over 240 hours. As we've had this going for the past 3 years, the only employees that have over 10 years of tenure with the league have been able to take advantage of that, because the number being 240. That equals 6 weeks of vacation. So you can cash out anything as long as you have 6 weeks of vacation banked. What we are proposing is to lower that number to 160 hours, which is 4 weeks vacation. The idea initially, and still here, is that it's kind of an incentive to stick with the league. You don't get to start cashing out vacation right away. You've got to be here for a while. You have to build that up in order for it to happen. Currently, it's only very long-term employees that are able to take advantage of that. And what we would like to do is move that carrot a little closer, so mid to long-term employees can take advantage of that. One requirement we also have that I failed to mention at the beginning here is that in order to cash out, you're allowed to cash out in June and December, or rather December and June, if you're looking at it from the fiscal year perspective. In order to do that, you have to have used either 20 in June or 40 in December PTO hours. So you're not allowed to just run yourself ragged and hoard up all your vacation time in order to cash out. You do have to utilize some of your vacation time, and that's something we wanted to make sure folks are doing here because it takes a lot to work here. So we do want people to use their vacation.
That
So
was the point, right?
Yeah.
And we talked about this last time, to make sure you all were taking
Yeah.
time.
Who signed up to take their vacation between, after King Day and before the end of March?
yeah, yeah, a whole lot of, that's where the the office closures that we do twice a year, that comes into effect because people are working more hours, imagine that, than 40 hours a week in that period. So what we are proposing is to lower that from 6 weeks to 4 weeks, and that opens it up for midterm employees to take advantage of being able to cash out. And it's nice, as someone who has been here for a very long time and has been able to take advantage of it. It is nice, particularly in those two times, December, right before Christmas, and at the end of the fiscal year, you can essentially give yourself a bonus, since we don't currently have a bonus structure put in, but you can get a little extra cash if you've managed to save up that vacation.
And Nick, the other thing I'll add here is if that medium-term employee were to leave for another job,
Yes.
we could just emphasize
Yeah.
this, that
Yeah,
we're
so all of our
on liability regardless.
Yeah, all vacation time, and I do have that in the memo, all of our vacation time is payable at termination. And that is a reason why we put the cap at 300, because before that you could save up, forever, someone's here for 30 years, save up a ton, and then, oh yeah, by the way, I'm leaving, and here's this huge fiscal dent to the organization. All of this is paid out at termination, so it's on our books. We have a liability every year that says, hey, you have all of this, all of the accrued vacation that employees have, we've got to take that as a liability on your books. So this kind of chips it down each year, and they take it out as real cash, but it effectively doesn't do anything to what vacation time costs us on our books.
Question, Nick, you said this and you said it really fast and I wasn't catching it. I didn't catch it. What's your sick leave accrual numbers and caps?
So the cap for sick leave is 400 hours, and anything over that, and that is not payable at termination. Essentially, sick time has been completely demonetized, but the cap is 400. Anything over 400 converts to vacation time at 50%. So if at the end of the year, end of the fiscal year, I have 420 vacation hours accrued, that will turn into 10 vacation hours. I will start again at 400, and then wherever my accrual was on vacation, 10 hours will be at.
So employees have enough that if they had some catastrophic circumstance and they needed 3 months of FMLA coverage.
Yep.
Between sick and vacation, that adds up to.
Yep, and then we also have our family medical leave policy, that is 6 weeks paid time. And then you can take another 6 weeks unpaid or use sick or vacation, that type of PTO. And that's if that's someone in your family, and that's what you use for maternity and paternity leave. But if something were to happen to you, and you don't have enough sick or vacation time, you are allowed to use that FMLA. Well, we don't say the A part because we're not under it, but it's based off of FMLA, our family medical leave. You're allowed to use that if you're out of that time. So we do have stuff in place for long-term medical leave for employees.
All right, any other questions?
I was just going to say thank you for talking about the incentive for employees to take leave, because you really do need, I think, a little downtime, especially when you have had those crunch months in January. And do you see any downside to this change? That was one question I had, which I think you addressed, but are there any other downsides? Because you really do want your employees to take leave and be.
Yeah. No, I don't see any downside to this policy because we make people take the leave in order to cash out. The only thing, and I wouldn't even refer to it as a downside, the only non-yay plus side would be just short-term budget. Now we will have more cash coming out, but ultimately on our books, there's no difference. It would be there as a liability or we'd have cash coming out. So I just need to be more aware, when we're looking at this, like, oh, well, now more people pay cash out and just paying attention to that would be the only thing that isn't, a major plus to this. I think overall, nothing policy-wise really changes here from what we adopted in 2021. We're just opening the door for more folks to be able to use it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, is there a motion to approve item 7?
I'll make a motion to approve.
All right, we have motions or second?
Second.
All right, motion and a second. All in favor of approval of item 7, the vacation cash out policy, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Well, that as well, there's no one opposed, that is approved. Item 8, the introduction to conflict competence.
We're going to turn to Molly first, actually.
Oh, we are.
Ready to have you introduce Dr. Mori and remind everybody why we're here.
Sure thing, yeah,
You're
so,
up.
the reason for the season, for this mega meeting, throughout the years, we've been discussing the challenges you've had in facing your communities, which is increasing conflict, that is kind of toxic, right, to your communities, and it hasn't been handled well necessarily, or it is causing division, whether that's amongst elected officials, between elected officials and staff, or members of the public and the local officials. It's a trend we're seeing nationwide, and as you had expressed, it's been percolating more and more at the local levels. And up until this point, we've been fairly insulated from that tension. So we have previously partnered with the Governor's Disagree Better initiative, as well as the Dignity Index. And as we were looking at what those initiatives focus around versus what we need, we realized that we likely needed tools that were a little bit more practicable and something that you could implement in your city. And that was tailored to local governments. So we have been working with Dr. Mori for the last little while. She attended mid-year to get a feel for our membership and what we do. And we asked her to come here to do a 90-minute training and conversation with you all. In the budget you just approved, we set aside some money to look at creating a curriculum and a program. After this meeting, we'll discuss what exactly, and I think even within this meeting a little bit as well, what would be helpful, what wouldn't be helpful, what are the skills and tools you need. So we have, what do you prefer, Dr. Roy, Professor?
I prefer Danya.
Danya, all right, so we have Danya here. She is at the University of Utah Law School. She does the Environmental Resolution Dispute Program, but it extends far beyond kind of the environmental arm is a big piece of it, but it extends really into all kind of conflict and dispute resolution. So we asked her to come here today to give us a bit of a crash course, but also to hear from you as to what your needs within your cities and towns are. So before we get started, I think it'd be helpful, one, you all have your name tags in front of you. If you can just kind of pivot those to the front so that Dominic can see who's here. And then if we could also have, so if we could do that, and then if you could also, if you could go around the room really quickly and just give your name.
I'm gonna do it.
Perfect, then I'm just gonna pass it over. Yes.
As a facilitator, I like to control the room. Hi, everyone, I'm Dr. Mori. I'm the first Danya. As Molly said, I run the Environmental Dispute Resolution, or EDR program, which is based in the Wall Center at the College of Law. My PhD is actually in planning, so I'm a planner by training, not a lawyer. And really my expertise and specialty is in helping people work through conflict to get to good outcomes. I work in the broad environment, the human environment, it's actually a lot of community planning work. So what I really want to do today is just to introduce the idea of what I call conflict competence. And I'll talk a little bit more about this in a moment. And that's what I want to do is introduce that idea and get us all talking about what you see as ULCTs, members, staff, anyone you work with, your needs around learning to deal with conflict productively, what would be helpful to you. So that's really what we're hoping to do today. So in terms of what to expect, I want to be really clear. One of the things I teach people is when expectations, when reality doesn't meet expectations, we have a problem, right? So I want to avoid problems, be really clear about what you can expect from today. I cannot make you a conflict Jedi in an hour and a half, right? But I can give you some useful concepts and tools that will apply to all aspects of your life, including all parts of your work. And really more than anything, this is going to be a teaser and a conversation starter. So I just want to be really clear about that. I also want to note these slides I put together are very simple. They're not very fancy, but they're meant to be a resource for you. So I will share these after today. I also have a little summary handout I'll send you. So you all will have that. So that will be helpful. And then if you want to go a little bit deeper after today, and hopefully we can go deeper together. Again, if this feels like it's relevant, we'd love to develop a training partnership with ULCT. But I also have some blog links that will be here in the slides. We also run a blog called EDR blog. It has lots of recent blogs on these concepts related to conflict competence. So with that, I'd love to hear from you all. I'm just hear who's in the room. You probably know each other. I don't know you. And this is also a chance for me to get a little information from you. So if folks are in mind, we'll just go around the room, and I'd love if you could just tell me your name, position, who you're with. And then I'd love just one word. It can be a hyphenated word, but one word you think of when you think of conflict. And I want to be really clear, there are no right or wrong words. It's just whatever comes to mind from you first when you think of conflict. So before we do this, I'm going to give everyone about 20 seconds to think about that word. Don't overthink it. And then we'll just go around and do a quick round.
Want me to start?
I'm going to start over here. We're going to complete across the room so I don't miss anything. I'm going to start over. Okay. Katie Harley, event manager of the league. Anxiety. Okay. Angela Adam, operations coordinator with the league. First word that came to my mind was stressful. Yeah.
Carson Island, policy director with the league, and the first word that comes to mind is frustration.
Molly Wheeler, deputy director of the league, same as Katie, anxiety.
Deb Ryan, land use for the league, tense. Cassidy, marketing for the league, probably challenging.
Definitely deputy director every day.
I'm a professor on the city of Public Virginia, but I'm also the president of the Competence
Association.
That's not cool, but disagreeing.
Nick Jarvis, chief operating officer with the league, and the first word that come to mind was fight.
Sonia Jessup, Hildell Mayor, misinformation.
Mary Malkovich, council member for the city of Woodland Hills. First word that came to me was misunderstanding.
I should say, if someone else says your word, that's okay, say it again.
Lindsay Peterson, Mayor of North Logan City, disagreement.
Seth Barron, city manager, Spanish for opportunity.
Wow. Ooh, we got some response to that one.
Troy Walker, Mayor of Draper City, work.
Cameron Dill, the director of the league. The word is politics.
Jeff Silverstein, Mayor of Mill Creek, profitability, pulling off of Mayor Walker's, and, but anxiety.
Coming on the table here.
Tammy Tran, Keysville City Mayor, and I think resolution.
Mark Shepard, Mayor of Clearfield City, and I actually was opportunity as well.
Harry Winch, Manti, council.
Eaton.
Nikki Wright, Mayor of Torrey, frustration.
City Council, and it's resolution.
Sorry, City Council, one-sided.
Go to the back there.
Roger two, general counsel, inevitable.
My name's Hope Lowry and I'm interning with Mayor Walker and my word was anger.
Axon Provo, deputy mayor, employees.
Jared Senior, legal director for the league, and misunderstanding.
Did I miss anybody? So the answer is yes, all of that, right? And that's what we're gonna talk about. So I'm gonna ask a favor of you all. I'm gonna ask everybody to get your phone, get your phone, and just to snap this little QR code. We have just a few questions for you in a short survey. I will note we are conducting ongoing research on how people perceive conflict. So if you are willing to fill out the survey, you'll just be dumped into our pool of respondents. No, you'll be totally anonymized. There's nothing attributed to you or identifiable to you. So if you're willing to take a few minutes to do this, it's a little bit for our research purposes, but I also want you to reflect on these 4 questions for just a moment. So I'm going to give us all about maybe 90 seconds, 2 minutes, no rush, but just take a moment and fill that out. If you have any issues, you can be closer and help you if need be. Take a moment and think about those things.
Maybe about 30 more seconds. Okay, hopefully that gave everyone a chance, a little bit of a chance to reflect on these things, think about them. I want you to think about those perspectives as we go through today's session. And I want to be really clear, there's no right or wrong. What's really interesting is how we think about and what we talk about, feel about conflict. So I'd love to hear from everybody. We've already got some words that relate to feelings in the room. I'd love to hear just top 10 ideas. What's one word that would describe how you feel when you encounter conflict? For anxiety, tension. What else have we got?
Frustration.
Frustration. Could be hurtful. Hurtful. And maybe pain. What else have we got? Exhaustion. Exhaustion. Right, so we would identify these as sort of uncomfortable or unpleasant or negative feelings. I just want to hold that for a second. Show of hands, who's encountered conflict in your work? Okay, your public officials, every hand needs to go up. Who has encountered conflict in your personal life? Yeah. We all have, right? Every day, somebody said, all the time. So I'd love to get a show of thumbs. How important do you think it is that local public officials know how to deal with conflict well? Really important, don't think so, yeah, it's fine, we'll be proud of it. Okay, seeing lots of thumbs up, maybe thumbs, whatever. That's fine, you are so welcome to your own perspectives. I'm not trying to make you drink the Kool-Aid here. How would you rate yourself if you're willing to share? How are you at dealing with conflict? Like, you know, I'm a Jedi, I'm a master, or like, show up on the thumbs, wherever you're at, that's fine. Some people feeling good, some people feeling, probably for a lot of us, like it depends.
I think it's easier in public than it is in your personal.
Actually, so that's interesting. Before I go here, one of the questions I ask people is who thinks it's easier in your personal life? Show of hands. Show of hands. Who thinks it's easier to deal with conflict in your personal life? Who thinks it's easier in your professional life? Interesting. You should have a bit more of a mixed audience.
There's policy and procedures in place in public.
Yeah. And maybe you feel protected in some ways by them, right? So it's something interesting for us to sit with. So what the first take, yeah.
I'm finding for me, it's an initial and then after maybe 10 minutes. And my initial reaction oftentimes, maybe all the time, is different than maybe 10 minutes in.
Would you like to share what your initial is and then
A lot of times that initial conflict is gut wrenching, maybe inflaming, and then after a second, I can wait a second, so let's back it up a little bit, and then look to understand more and listen, and then put myself in their shoes, learn, and then great things come from it. What I'm working on for Seth personally is that first 10 minutes. I've got to figure that 10 minutes out better.
we're gonna come back to that, and I really appreciate you sharing that like in what we call embodied experience, right? Like I feel tightness in my chest, the pressure in my head, I feel hot, you know, just like tuning into that and also like realize it's really helpful. I'm gonna come back to that in a moment, so let's put a pin in that. So the first takeaway I want to leave you all with, and I think we've kind of already illuminated this for ourselves, is conflict just is. It just is. It just happens. And what's so powerful about this is that you can accept that no matter who you are and what kind of work you do, whether you're working in the public sector or otherwise, you are going to encounter diverse perspectives, needs, wants, ideas, right? Conflict is going to happen. So the important thing for us to start to really wrap our heads around is the question's not whether conflict is going to happen, but it's what you need to do when it happens. What do you want to do when it happens? So instead of trying to avoid conflict or make it go away, which when we think about it, often that's what we're trying to do. Or we're trying to like, I don't know, attack it basically. Instead of thinking about that, I find it much more helpful to think about how can we make conflict productive? How are we going to take this thing that just is and make it an opportunity, as people said? So we'll come back to that. And how can we productively work across diverse perspectives, needs, ideas, right? It's not going to go away, so how do we make it productive? And how do we solve problems and get good outcomes for ourselves, for our communities, for our nation, for our world, when people don't see eye to eye? Because you know what? They're not always going to see eye to eye. And how can we help diverse groups and communities tackle complex public problems and make progress? Right? These are very different questions than how do I make this go away, which is I think what we often tend to associate with conflict. So we'll dwell on. So let's talk about conflict. Before we do though, I have a little exercise for you. I'm going to ask you to indulge me. This will probably be very different from your typical. Before we go there, I actually got it out of order. So I want to come back to this idea that Seth made. So we have two exercises. Takeaway 2 is do not pass go with anything in your life, and especially with dealing with conflict until your neurological system is calm. And that's exactly what Seth is talking about. Right? So when you have been taught that conflict is a problem and conflict happens, your neurological system says, I'm at threat right now. I need to protect myself. And that's going to lead us to fight, flight, freeze, or fawn behaviors. And the research is super clear that that's what we tend to do. Whenever we feel threatened, whether it's a physical threat or an emotional threat, our body naturally to protect us goes into what we call a dysregulated state. And that is the heat, that is the tightness in the chest. That is I need to armor up right now, whatever that feeling might be like. So one of the things that I started teaching in all of my courses and using in all of my meetings is just the idea of we need to become calm and present here and now before we can productively engage. And that actually includes before we can learn. So that's why I'm bringing it here into the training. You're much better able to learn when our neurological systems are calm and pleasant, right? So you may not be feeling angry right now, but you might be thinking like, there's all this stuff that I need to do this afternoon. That's a version of dysregulation. You're not here now, right? You might be thinking like, oh my gosh, I'm so worried about my kids and whatever. You're not here now. So I'm going to ask you all for your own good and also for our learning together to just take 60 seconds with me and practice just breathing calmly and thinking about being present here and now. And you're going to have all the crazy thoughts come into your head. And I'm going to ask you to feel like, I see those, I hear them, and like, let them go here and now. So this is a gift to you. I hope you will take the 60 seconds with me. Just breathe calmly here and now. Thanks, everybody. Hopefully you gave yourself that little bit of space. And Seth couldn't have set me up better. When we go into that space of like feeling the tightness in chest, right? It can take us a long time to come back to, oh, they have a reasonable concern. I just need to understand their concern and try to better listen and help them. Right? When your brain is dysregulated, you cannot think logically, you cannot think rationally, you cannot think creatively. It's very, very hard to listen to someone else. And I bring this up because I think we are often functioning in a state of mild dysregulation that we're not even aware of, especially think about the news. Right? Think about what's constantly bombarding us. Like our systems are feeling very threatened. And I have spent a lot of time researching why conflict is so hard for us. And I basically come to because we treat it like a bear in the woods. Right? So when we treat it like a bear in the woods, we go into defend and attack mode, and we are setting ourselves up for a fight. Right? Whereas if we say like, this person doesn't feel the same as I do, or they have some different needs or concerns, let me be curious and try to understand that. It's amazing the opportunities that can unfold. But in order to be able to do that, we have to regulate our neurological system. So I love this quote. It's attributed to Viktor Frankl, who is a concentration camp survivor, also a psychiatrist. And his quote is, between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. And in our response lies our growth and our freedom. The basic idea is something happens, and I choose how I respond to what happens. But I just want you to be really mindful. In order to choose how you respond, you have to be neurologically regulated. Otherwise, you actually aren't. The lizard brain is choosing for you. This is part of our brain called the amygdala. It's basically saying, threat, I need to. So what I really want to drive home for you all is if we want to become more skills in dealing with conflict, we have to take this stuff super seriously. And we have to start choosing how we deal with conflict. I just use a simple figure here of when we become aware of something, we then develop new skills for how to deal with it. Then we can make different choices. We can practice those choices, and that rewires. Or eventually, if we keep practicing, we develop new default modes. And what I want to communicate, right, is for a lot of us, our default mode is conflict is a problem, therefore I need to just regulate and protect myself. And that might be I like just shut down, or it might be I start yelling, or any variety of other things. And what I want you to start to think about is become aware of how you tend to deal with conflict, how other people around you tend to deal with conflict. And then if you feel like that's not serving you, it's not getting the best outcomes, right? It's not getting the best outcomes for you. For others, you can learn new skills. That's part of what we're here to do today. That allows you to make different choices, but then you have to practice those choices. And for a lot of us, me included, we have a lot of rewiring in our brain that we need to do. So I'm going to ask you all to be really compassionate for yourself and others when you leave today. If you're like, I've never even thought about this stuff, and I can see why maybe I got some bad outcomes, or I've been doing that thing, or wow, I tend to get really dysregulated, or my partner tends to get really dysregulated. Just to understand how human that is, and that frankly, and I'll say this later, but like if you don't do conflict skillfully, conflict will do you. And I think it's doing our country and our communities right now, right? And so I think it's time to, a lot of my students like this, it's time to become more advanced humans, right? To recognize why our brain does what it does, and then to make some different choices. So that's what we're doing. Okay, now we get to do the really fun exercise. So to get us started, again, indulge me if there is a reason we're doing this. I'm going to ask you all to thumb wrestle. Does anyone in the room not know how to thumb wrestle? Anyone not know? It's okay if you don't. Okay, I'm going to ask everyone to find a partner. Do not talk. Find a partner. You can talk to find a partner. Everyone find a partner. You're going to thumb wrestle with a partner. Find a person. Find a When I say go, no talking. When I say go, your goal is to score as many points as you can. I'm going to give you 15 seconds, okay? Get ready, get set, go.
I'm still losing this. Mark, I didn't know either.
But it's okay. Wow, that's Mark, what's going on over there? Professional thumber. Okay, so, what we're gonna do is we're gonna do another round. But before this round, I'm gonna give you 30 seconds to talk with your partner. Okay, so after 30 seconds, we're gonna do another round. When the round starts, no more talking. But you have 30 seconds now to talk to your partner before we start that Okay, when I say go, you start, no talking, and if your bullets is for as many points as you can. Okay, get ready, get set, go.
My laptop.
And stop.
Oh, thank
I got 28. 28. Anybody get more than? How did you get 15?
Well, let me tell you. Isaac approached the problem in a way different than I perceived. And he shared that with me with effective communication. And I said, I hadn't thought about it like that. I agree, that should be better. Let's try it. So we just let each other take points, what do you want to do?
Switch off.
We did.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we,
He won, I won. That's great.
Oh, we did. Yeah. Right, I didn't even say, hey, Nick, she didn't say we couldn't do both hands. So I'm gonna ask you all, what do you take away from?
I think it's brilliant, what do you
We were defense. We were still competing.
He has massive hands.
We had-
Look, no difference in that. It's not even fair.
We were focused on the battle itself and not the outcome of scoring a bunch of points.
Whoa, insightful,
Yeah.
I like that. We did like they did, but we were doing this back and forth, and we should have did that 1, 2, 3, 4, and then switched to the other person. But we did it back and forth.
How many points did you get in the first round? 0. 14's better than 0.
Don't got 28.
Yeah.
Second between the
14
two.
is better than 0, right? So there's something to be said even there. There's so many, I love this exercise. Right? Like even if they have to max out, I'm gonna feel a lot better than you would have if you, like, if your baby did better, who cares? Right? You did better by working together. Okay, so there's so many things I want to say. So what I want to drive home from this exercise, I mean, I love it because it makes me look into good, and having worked for now almost 2 decades on complex situations, this is real. This is what happens, right? So some issue of mutual concern brings people into interaction with each other, interdependence, right? This could be anything from the Great Salt Lake to score as many points as you can, because you cannot score points on your own. You are now dependent on your partner. People have different needs and concerns, right? Like I need points, Nick needs points. We have different things. And it's very easy to assume that the situation is zero sum. Well, if Nick needs points, I need points, I'm gonna have to fight him. Like if he's getting points, that means I'm losing points, right? This is a mindset we tend to apply to the world and definitely to conflict. So not only is it not zero sum, there's actually the flip side of that. There's the potential to create value through effectively working together. And I'm not going to get too deep into this today, but this is not kumbaya, let's all get along. This is how can we effectively work together to meet your needs and my needs. And the flip side is true, right? When you do not work together, there is potential, and it often happens, to lose value. And I can tell you so many, and you've probably seen it, so many community conflicts where we're so stuck on fighting over what we're going to call positions that the thing is getting worse over time, right? Everybody's losing. Maybe a few parties are kind of winning, but I would say everybody's. So to create what we're going to call mutual gains, and this is what I wanted really to illustrate from this group, right? 0 points was the baseline, 14 points for each is a huge gain for each. That is a mutual gain. Everybody does better by creating a joint strategy following through reaching agreement. So to create mutual gains, parties have to reach agreement on and actually implement the joint strategy. And that strategy has to meet their needs. So this is where we're not going to get deep into this today because this is a much bigger skill set, but this is about negotiating, effective interest-based negotiation, and what I'm going to call true effective collaboration. Troy?
Well, I was just gonna say, Seth and I went the Neanderthal route, and we didn't even think of scoring, that what you said, score as many points as you can. That translated to our brains to compete completely. Against that.
And that's why this is so important, that we tend to assume so much.
Right.
What is possible, what's not possible, what the rules are. Like I've had a lot of people when they talk to each other, they're like, well, that's not how I learned to do thumb wrestling. You gotta do 1, 2, 3, 4, I declare thumb. Right, so then you're already like 10 seconds into your thumb wrestling, right? So this gets to some of these other points I have here. This is so core. Effective communication, we'll talk more about this, is key to identifying and implementing that joint strategy. Right, so I gave you all a chance to talk to your partner, and a lot of you are like, why is she making us thumb wrestle? This is super weird. Or like, hey, let's try the other hand. Or right, you were talking, but you weren't talking about the right things. And so this so often is we get people in a room and we say, we're collaborating. I'm like, well, what are you talking about? They're not talking about the conflict. They're not talking about their core needs. They're not talking about creative, innovative strategies for addressing their needs. Right, so I say this without any judgment, just a reflection, a mirror on the world that I see when I work on this stuff all the time. Talking is not enough. You need to be effectively communicating
I'm not gonna get too deep into this, but most of us have learned a lot of things about communication, some of which are helpful, but we haven't learned so much basic rules about what we need to communicate. So I'll get into that.
We noticed too that, it was a trust factor, like the mayor and Frank said, you know, they were in mindset of competition, and
Yeah.
when we talked, it was like, okay, trust. You go first, I'll go second. I have the trust that we were gonna really do that, and it worked.
What a great setup for this next point. Parties have to have confidence. You can call it trust, you can call it confidence in each other to follow through. This is huge. And I use the word confidence now more than trust because trust has sort of a moralistic thing, like, don't you trust me? Like, I just want to have confidence that you're gonna follow through and that your city, when it has a new mayor, is gonna follow through. This has nothing to do with trust of you. This is a confidence, right? So parties have to have confidence in each other to follow through, otherwise it all falls apart. And the joke is, this actually isn't the case so much now with the students I teach, but historically, when we used to do this with law students, any lawyers in the room? No judgment. When we used to do this with law students, they would often have one or two groups that would be like doing their nice little, they figure out the thing, they're doing their thing, and at the end, one student goes in for the kill. So when we see that, we say, no talking, we're gonna do another round. What happens in that group? The next person's right back to fighting. Right, so important, and again, this is not like just be nice, this is a pragmatic skill set. If I want you to meet my needs, I need to think about meeting your needs. And if I basically say, I am a threat to you, I am asking you to armor up, defend and attack, and we are not going to threaten. So, if one party doesn't follow through, it erodes confidence, which both know, and future dealings are likely to be more difficult, it might totally make it impossible, or there's just a lot of work that has to be done to rebuild. And I would also add to this, related to this, this is not like just, I'll trust you. It's not that. It's parties can and need to take action to protect their interests. So let's say that Nick and I are like, we're gonna do 2 thumbs, and like, I'm gonna tag with this, he's gonna tag this thumb, we're both gonna get points. But then or actually, that's better. Let me give a better example, because sometimes this is the best, right? I'm just gonna tag you as many times as possible, and then we'll split the points. If I say that, if Nick was to say, let me tag you as many times as possible, I have a fastest thumb. And I'll give you half the points. I'd say, let's have a contract. Because otherwise, I'm being vulnerable. I'm being silly. I'm not protecting my interests. Because what if even Nick had the best intentions, but then he gets replaced before I get my points? Right? So this is about not defensive action, but just being smart, taking care of your interests. It could be a legal contract. It could be a bond. It could be it's not that we don't trust you to follow through, but we just need to make sure there's mechanisms in place to protect our interests. This isn't personal. Right? So that's a key part of all this too. So I'm going to stop there for a second. What is surfacing for folks? Again, great sharing from your groups, what you're observing, anything else coming up?
One thing I was thinking about when you're talking about changes of administration, say in the middle of conflict, I think that's maybe the most difficult thing that I've had to navigate is where the trust has been obliterated and then I step in and I'm acting on behalf of this entity. So I don't know if you can speak to that, like how to, when you're stepping in the middle of a conflict that's already, things have already passed, how do you get back to where you need to be?
Yeah.
If the other party has stayed the same, but you're now representing a city, for instance.
It's a big thorny question. I'm going to put a pin in that one just because I think there's some basic concepts I want to get through first. So let's see if we can get back to that today. A short answer is, it depends on what you're working towards, right? Are you working towards rebuilding trust or kind of confidence in each other? Because then it's just slowly putting the marbles in the marble jar, right? And letting people know that you have confidence. It can be as simple as I would love to agree to this. And 5 years ago, we had this thing happen where we got really burned. I know it's not your fault. And this time around, we need to make sure we have a contract in place right? And one of the things I'm going to drive home is about not personalizing the problem. Right? It's not like you guys did this to us. It's just this happened. We'd like to avoid it in the future. What could we do? Okay, so this is the effective communication thing. We're not going to get super deep into it today. Again, I will reiterate, there's only so much we can do in an hour. I cannot rewire decades of training in how we deal with conflict, but I do hope I can leave you with some kind of tantalizing ideas that actually might fundamentally change how you operate in the world. And if what we do today is really interesting, that's part of the opening for do we want to go farther than training partnership, and how could we help all the different communities go? Yeah.
I think for me, you have it bolded there. It's the first one, and people often assume, and we were ignoring that bold 0 sum.
Yeah.
But putting that into the mix for me is probably really powerful in terms of if I come into a conflict not thinking their win is my loss, what can that do for every conflict that I'm in? I love that phrase. Thanks.
Absolutely, and I've been working on a book of why conflict's so hard for us, and what I've come down to is, again, this neurological dysregulation piece, but then related to that, it's like interwoven with it is our zero-sum ways in the world. And I could go on a whole rant about this, I won't. The basic takeaway is, if you were in the Serengeti and there was only so much food, then you're in a zero-sum situation potentially, right, especially if you don't have good habits. We operate as if we were still in that setting. And the problem is we're actually going to create this lose-lose. We're eroding the opportunity to create value through our treating things as literally zero sum instead of being like, what can we do together to solve this problem? Right? And it's so simple, but not easy, as we say, right? Like in some ways, dealing with conflict productively is a very simple thing, but it's very hard because our brains aren't wired that way. That's not the way we've been operating. So I would really encourage you all to lead today and think about these conflicts in front of you and ask yourself, oh, am I treating this like a zero-sum situation? Why am I doing that? Oh, I treated that like a zero-sum situation. Was it really? So just leave with some questions for yourself. And I want to kind of get into some more of these things that are going to give you this framework to have that conversation with yourself. So first thing is, what is conflict? And I'm going to put forward my definition. It's actually really interesting to nerd out on me for a second. There's no like commonly accepted academic definition of conflict. If you look at different dictionaries, you're going to find different definitions. I've come up with a definition that I think serves us well and actually reflects what I've seen on the ground after decades of work. So I think of conflict as simply the intersection of different ideas, perspectives, needs, and wants that are in tension with each other and not easily reconciled, right? Like we have different perspectives on this thing. It feels like this. And what we're going to talk about is when we understand conflict productively and we work with it productively, we can shift a situation that is this into this. And that's where we integrate and create something new. So let me give you an example of that. So before we do this, a few things. So the few statements I want you to sit with. The first one, as I said, conflict just is. It's not going away. We don't always see it out of that. And conflict can be extremely destructive. We're seeing way too many examples of that, from conflict resulting in war to just like the national politics to frankly what's happening in a lot of families, right? I have a lot of my students come to me and say, I can't even talk to my parents anymore. The flip side, though, is if we deal with conflict skillfully, it can be enormously generative. All new things that are created through the synergy of different things coming together, right? And I often like to think of ecosystems where saltwater and freshwater come together are some of the most fertile ecosystems. That integration of different things can create new and better. And the same is true with conflict if we know how to harness them. So how parties deal with conflict, like we saw in this situation, is going to determine whether conflict is productive. Wow, we both got a bunch of points out of this, or it's destructive. Like I got 0 points and I'm mad, right? And effective communication, as I said before, is key to making conflict productive and avoiding what we call a dispute, which is how I think of when conflict starts to become destructive. People are angry, people are upset, or lose value, right? And I'm not making a judgment statement that disputes are bad. There will be times we have disputes and they end up in court and they need to be solved. That's just going to happen. The problem, though, is that we don't even see the potential to avoid that, to resolve conflict in a way that. So even once we get to a dispute, right, effective communication can still roll things back and get us to a much more productive place. And this might be that example where the bad things have happened and now we're trying to learn to work together again. And when we need to reach agreement about courses of action, we actually need to decide and do something together, which we don't always with conflict. It's okay to have different ideas about something. If we don't need to reach agreement, fine. Wow, that's a really interesting idea. End of story. Right? But like, ooh, we're going to manage this plot of land together. We need to agree about how we're going to do it. That's when we get into like kind of conflict competency on steroids, which I call, or how I think of negotiation collaboration. We're going to have to actually collaborate. We're going to have to negotiate solutions. I will not get into that skill set today. That is a much more advanced skill set. Molly is going to take a 6-month class with my team around this stuff, so she can hopefully tell you more. But there are lots of resources I can direct you to. So when we think about how we can deal with conflict, right, this intersection of different ideas, needs, and wants, we can just resolve this in a hot tub, right? We can sit in a hot tub and be like, that's so interesting you feel that way, end of story. Or like, how are we going to raise the kids? Like, you feel this way, I feel this way. Okay, we're cool, right? It can be that easy. Unfortunately, when we don't productively deal with it, it goes down and down and down the stream, and we end up sometimes with flat out war, right? And what I would say is like, there are many ways of dealing with conflict. And I talk about conflict competence as a way of thinking about productively dealing with conflict, but avoiding conflict, arguing, fighting, violence, war, these are things we tend to think of as conflict. They are not conflict. They are ways of dealing with conflict, and they are unproductive ways of dealing with conflict, right? So I actually kind of bristle a little bit when we say the conflict in Gaza. That's a war. That is people throwing bombs at each other. I don't even know if we're really clear at this point what the actual conflict, that intersection of different ideas, needs, and wants is. I think it's a big mess. It's really complicated, right? But I want to be really clear, like, that is not conflict, that is war, right? And parties yelling at each other, that is not conflict, or that is not conflict itself, that is just yelling, right? So what is the conflict? And then we make choices about how we deal with it.
So what did you call the words underneath it? You said they are not conflict, so
They're unproductive ways of dealing with conflict.
ways of
Yeah.
dealing with.
So getting to that, so I think productive ways of dealing with conflict are kind of under this umbrella of what I call conflict competence. Right, so it's a big umbrella, but and there's a lot of skills under it, but it's basically saying, I recognize conflict can be an opportunity. I recognize I need to deal with it skillfully, and I'm going to try to do that. And I want to be really clear again that I like not, there's no passing of judgment in the like, I tend to yell, I've done this, like I've done it too. It's hard. I've taught people for almost, again, 2 decades, and I'm still sometimes like, wow, I didn't deal with that very well. But what I know to do is like, why did I not do that well? Ooh, I felt really afraid. Why did I feel really afraid? And I can roll it back and be like, what can I do now that this is productive?
Could I ask a
Yeah.
question?
Absolutely.
So what we've been discussing, at least in my head, I'm seeing more like maybe 2 groups on opposite sides of the fence needing to resolve an issue, or 2 individuals. I'd like at some point if you could address what I've seen in some city councils where you have a public hearing and you just have people come in with their hair on fire. They just want to like vent and scream and yell. Some good suggestions of dealing with that, where it's not a situation where you can sit down and have a discussion.
Yeah.
You're there to,
Yeah. So yeah, it's something I want to come back to a little after I give a little bit more tools and resources. But one of the things I want to drive home today, and I'll come back to this, but it's often what we call conflict is actually just dysregulated humans. Right? So you and your partner are yelling at each other over the dishwasher. It's not about the dishwasher. There might be some underlying conflict there, and you need to surface it, but it's not about the dishwasher. Right? And so I would say like even that, like maybe that phrase in your head when you have, as they say, like a member of the public cheering loudly at you is like, it's not about the dishwasher. Right? And just be able to hold that and be like, this person is super dysregulated for some reason. I don't know. I probably will never know. What is the most productive thing I could do right now? Right? And that could be any variety of things. I know you work in a lot of different contexts. I'm going to ask you all to think about how these ideas relate to your context. I may say some examples that don't resonate with you, that's fine, but like really be thinking about how these ideas relate to what you do. But it could be literally that you just sit there and kind of compassionately, like in your mind, you're like, this isn't about the dishwasher, this isn't about the thing, and like, wow, this person's really dysregulated. It's really unfortunate, right? I'm not like, oh, it's so sad. It's not that. It's just more like, that's really unfortunate that this person is so upset that they feel like the best thing they can do is come up and take the mic and scream at me. Right? This takes a lot of your own regulation, but you just think this is not about me. What is the most productive thing I could do? Maybe I could just sit here and listen and say, thank you very much for sharing that perspective. We'll take that into consideration. Maybe that's the thing. Maybe it's a situation where you can say, like, it sounds like you have some very major concerns about this. I know we can't get into them today. Would you be willing to have, go out and meet with me during my usual office hours? Right? Like, what is that thing you could do? Right? And sometimes the thing you can do is saying, like, I'm hearing you're really upset about this. I don't feel like this is the right forum for these points you're sharing. Would you be willing to share them this other way? Or give somebody a way. But when you basically say, like, you need to sit down, that's an attack. There's no space for what you care about here. And I know you don't mean it that way, but that's how it feels to our neurological system. Right? Whereas if you can some way say, and we'll get to this moment, but like, I hear you have concerns and I want to better understand them, or I want to give you a space for them, or I want to kind of just acknowledge this really matters to you. Like, that's how we start to diffuse the emotions. But even better, and we're not going to get a lot into this today, even better is like using structure to liberate. Right? So you can use structure to liberate, where can people share those concerns? Or how do you make clear that this is not the place to share those concerns? Not in a personal way, but just like and I've heard a lot of communities do this, like We are only taking comment on things related to our big agenda today. And if you have other concerns, here's other ways you can share, community survey or whatever. Right, but just I want to let everyone know, if you stand up and share a concern that's not related to our agenda items, I am going to ask you to sit down. It's not personal, but that's how we set up our meeting. Right, so you're using structure in that way to try to encourage better behavior and just prevent the dysregulated humans, which we all can be that person, but to prevent that from getting in the way of important business. Okay, I'm going to keep rolling. I think a lot of the ideas I'm going to talk about will relate to the things that have come up. So I've given you the thumb wrestling exercise. It's an easy thing to come back to be like, okay, this is a thumb wrestling exercise situation, right? Another good little mental thing to come back to is what we call a story of the orange. It's been used for a long time in conflict resolution teaching. And the story goes something like this. There are two teenage kids in the kitchen fighting over the last orange in the kitchen. It's Mother's Day. Mom comes in, sees the kids fighting. What the heck? It's Mother's Day. They're fighting on Mother's Day. She grabs the orange, cuts it in half, gives them both a half. And I was like, guys, stop fighting. It's Mother's Day. I just wanted a peaceful Mother's Day. Half an orange. There's only one orange left. Both of the kids are super upset. They throw their oranges on the floor. They stomp out. You have teenage kids, maybe you've seen this behavior. And she's just like, whoa, what just happened? Like, clearly half an orange is a fair solution. And so she calms herself down, finally is able to go talk to her daughter. Like, hey, honey, there was one orange. You and your brother wanted it. Half an orange is clearly the fair solution. And the daughter's like, Mom, for Mother's Day, I wanted to make you grandma's muffin recipe, and I need the rind of a whole orange. And half an orange, it won't taste the same. I was like, oh. She goes and talks to her son, like, hey, why are you so upset? And half an orange is clearly a fair solution. And the son's like, Mom, I wanted to surprise you by making this marinated steak recipe I learned in home ec, and it needs the juice of a whole orange. And the mom has this moment of oh, if I hadn't treated this as a zero-sum situation, where she's like, if I had just walked into that room and asked kids, hey guys, take a moment, breathe, what's going on here? It looks like you both want the orange. Can you tell me more of what you want the orange for? It could have very easily become clear that one wanted the rind, one wanted the juice. Right? We didn't even have any practical, we didn't have a conflict, really. Right? They wanted different things, but they were so focused on the orange that they weren't even talking about what they really needed. Right? So you could imagine a situation where they both need the rind of the orange. Right? This is where the creative thinking comes in, being like, well, I've always wanted to make grandma's recipe with lemon. Would you be willing to try that? Oh, we're gonna have this similar recipe, but a little different, and everybody's really happy with that, right? And at the end of the story, if you figure out that one kid wants to make the muffins, one makes the steak, everybody gets muffins and steak, and mom is happy. And what's even more important, when you keep rolling back, peeling up the layers of the onion, why were the kids fighting over the orange? Because they wanted to do something nice for mom. But what happened? They were fighting, and mom got really upset. Right, so this is so real. This is the lose-lose game that we get ourselves in because we get really stuck on what I'm going to call positions. So a position is a particular solution or strategy. We need to not have any ADUs, right? I'm not saying there might be good reason for that, but that is what we call a particular solution strategy, a position. Whereas the interest is fundamental need or concern. What is it that really matters to you? Right, so the story of the orange, the kids were focused on the orange. That was position, but they were also focused on making muffins for the marinated steak. Also kind of position, and their fundamental desire was to do something really nice for mom. And they totally lost sight of that and ended up acting totally against their interests. So this happens all the time. I mean, I see it all the time, people acting against their own interests. And if you walk away today with just an ability to understand the difference between interests and positions and start to put that in practice, one, it will change your life. I'm not saying that lightly. I have trained hundreds and hundreds of people, and they consistently say this, and I have felt it too. But it will also change the world around you. It is very profound. So this is one of the key things I want to leave you with today is that separating the particular solutions or strategies from what really matters to me. What is my fundamental need or concern? So in understanding this, we don't have to go super deep into this, but just so you don't overly simplify this concept, it's very easy to focus on what we call substantive interests, such as, I need this from an outcome in terms of I'm going to get a certain amount of time or whatever. But what actually is often more important are what are called procedural or emotional interests. And this goes to the community, the angry community member example. More often than not, people just want to be heard and considered. And a lot of people are really angry in our country right now because they don't think they feel heard and considered. And so I would encourage you to think about how can you help community members in a productive way feel heard and considered. And that is not let's have an open mic and everybody scream at each other, right? That's not the way to do it. Because they're going to focus on positions. So this is another way to think about working with your communities. How do I get people to focus more on their interests How do I get them to share what really matters to them? And I see this all the time. Communities send out surveys. Should we build a gondola or not? At least a local example. No. Yes. No, yes. That gives me no information. No information. Right? But I could say like, it has been proposed that we would build a gondola of Little Cottonwood Canyon. What concerns do you have about this? How might this affect you? How could this be helpful? What could be some benefits? You might still get a bunch of positions, but at least you're asking questions that are more likely to elicit meaningful, useful information. Because you can build a gondola in a lot of different ways, or you could develop a lot of different transportation systems that maybe achieve a lot of things. Right? But when we get so fixated on gondola and no gondola, that we're not even talking about, it's not so much what we do, it's how we do it and what needs to be in mind. So just to emphasize this. And in a moment here, we do an exercise. Again, people are kind of getting restless, so just hold steady for like a minute and then I'll give you a little exercise. We'll count. So the goal is not, when we're talking about this, the goal is not to be like, this is a, oh, I should be more clear. So substantive is like something of substance you get from your outcome. Procedural has to do with the process, right? So lots of people just want to feel fairly considered, that it was a fair process. And emotional and relational is like how it's going to make me feel or how it affects my relationships. So all those things matter. And I bring this up because the goal isn't necessarily to like clearly put things in those buckets. And if we have more time, I'd give you an exercise to start practicing identifying interest versus position. But the goal is really to understand that like these different things matter to people. And as I have at the bottom here, that often the emotional and relational and procedural interests are as or more important than substance. So we get super focused on substance. And in so doing, often like, why are you happy? You got a good outcome. But somebody like inside is being like, I didn't actually feel very complete. It's like they didn't feel very fair. Okay, so takeaway one was conflict just is. Takeaway two is that you have to be calm and present before you can choose productive level of conflict. And takeaway three is you have to focus on interest, not positions. As soon as we start focusing on positions, we get in that seemingly intractable fight about the work, and we're going nowhere. Okay. So I want to give you a little bit of a chance here to just practice a little bit with this idea of interest versus position. So I'm going to ask you to, on your own for 2 minutes, just think of a real world conflictual situation you've experienced. Maybe aim for one at work, but if you can't think of one, then think of something in your personal life or whatever is helpful for you. And I want you to really think like, what positions were you pushing for? Right? It might be like that my son had to go to this school, or it might be that like we had to have this particular ADU policy. So think about what your positions were. And then really try to think about what are your interests, the fundamental needs or concerns. And a way you can help yourself get there is by asking, why is that important? Why did I think that was a good idea? Call it the 9 whys. Ask why 9 times to peel back the layer of the onion until you're like, ooh, the real nugget of like the need or concern was maybe X or X and Y. So I'm gonna have everybody do this. If you need to like stand up, get some water, please do that. But I'll give us 3 minutes. So please just be back if you're gonna move, be back in 3 minutes, ready to talk about
No, that's the only company. It's funny like that. Like, oh my God, talking about Heck, my daughter's yeah, it's like, that started bringing the barricade to the kid. Oh, that's.
Oh, yeah.
The whole thing I was trying to jump.
Yeah.
anything, you can go that way, or you can do it. either way.
No. One thing I'm just wondering right now. I listen. I'm hoping you know. I'm here.
So we started this year.
Crack it on, huh?
Doing a good job of.
Rail trail.
Influencer. And I have to leave and get back. Emergency management.
Oh, my goodness. What time is that?
6:30. Make it. Housing supply accelerator. I've added the traffic.
Assuming people.
For not having a development or because.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not a big deal.
She was bailing here. She was stopped.
At least it's not. Wow, what do we do?
Every single day. Development.
Oh, no.
We are still been definitely opposed. Help her. Help her see how these.
You know, and when you think.
All right, everybody, I'm getting this done, so see just a little more compression or decompression time, so I'll give it 2 more minutes. Please make sure that after that 2 minutes, you thought about this example, we're gonna talk about it here.
What, you have that? What are you?
Provoking.
Going through. Now,
I don't. That's a justice correct.
Wow.
Don't understand.
Yeah.
all right, everybody, I should have brought my dinner to the team, I forgot it, I've been doing too much virtual training, not in person. Yeah, you just like. Okay, everyone, I'm gonna ask you so you can get the most value out of this. To turn to a partner if you need to at 3, but I wanna make sure everyone has a chance to share and kind of workshop a little bit with each other. I'm gonna give us just maybe like 5 minutes in a pair for you to introduce your situation, explain what you thought, how you think your positions, like what you think they were, what you see as your interest. And I want you to have the other person then share, and I want you to workshop that. And I want you to be like thoughtful partners for each other and say, you know, that actually seems like a position. Which is often what's gonna happen, I'll be honest, right? Like we think we're getting to our interest, we're still being positional. Maybe this really drives with you, it's really easy to identify that. But I'm just gonna have you partner up, share, each person share, and then talk a little bit about it and try to learn together, basically, try to deepen your learning. Does that work? Okay, let's try 4 minutes, I'll do a little time, if you need more time, maybe an extra.
Oh, that's my face.
I want you to, what it's gonna be like in 2 months. No.
Well, you go first. You go
All
first.
right, mine actually.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think the interest that they're both of us are looking for is a successful application.
It was. No, the only
My concern is for like, situation that has so many today.
They did to turn
Right, why, yeah, why spend the brain power and energy?
I think it really was. I don't like going or. Yeah. And
Just putting that
Specifically where I advocate. Why I thought that she was fine. Anyway, so.
Speaking of your
saying that.
Mine really fast. And I did that. Yeah, and like, why don't the, and I think another one of my positions. Who are acting as I can. Yeah.
And then people coming and saying, well, too, right?
Yeah.
They don't have to have a big.
And your professional.
So that's really hard. Especially if it's not a number of dollars.
I was trying to get that.
Okay, since nobody is saying they want another minute, I'm gonna bring your attention back forward. And I want to just ask you this question, how was that? So maybe first to show of thumbs, how easy was it to differentiate into your position? You're like, I nailed it, it was so easy, or like, oh, this is not hard. Show of thumbs, how was it? Yeah, kind of hard. I mean, some people, maybe it comes naturally to you, or maybe you thought you got to interest, but you didn't. No judgment if you didn't. Like for most of us, this is actually pretty hard. It is a totally different way of seeing and thinking about the world. And again, I say based on a lot of evidence, and now we're bringing our reason figure on this, that like, it is a liberating way of seeing the world. Where you're like, I don't have to fight for that thing anymore. That's not even important. It's important is this thing. Right? Like, why are my partner and I fighting over the dishwasher? Like, the most important thing is our like commitment to each other and having each other's backs. Right? It can show up in all these different parts of your life. And so I just really, again, like, you leave today with anything. I'll give you the recap of the takeaways, but I hope the big one is like, focus on interests, not positions. Play with it, have fun with it, don't judge yourself when you find yourself being positional, and like, see how it works out for you. And I have a strong hypothesis that you'll find it very liberating, helpful. Actually, so before I go there, any other like observations, reflections, again, how did that go for you? What did that start off?
For us, it's kind of sort of just, you know, we just talking about the conflict of hockey stadium. You heard about that?
Yeah.
Like, it was like, okay, what are some of the people who actually, I know my idea, so what's their interest? Back to the why, I always go to the why. What's the why? What's the why? Exactly. And we all, I don't know what, I know they're, what they want, they don't want that, they want, they don't want, you know, do this, but what's the underlying? I always sometimes struggle with that, okay, what's their, where's that why?
Yeah.
I'm sometimes on both sides, like, what's their why, what's their why? In this case, it's like, okay, I know my why, what's their why? So we can have that one up.
Right. Yeah, and it's huge. And again, one thing I want to caution you is to not assume you know. Oh, their why is, don't assume you know. Right, assumptions are very, very dangerous. You know, there's so many nuggets in this whole conflict world, but one of the big things is assumptions will get you in trouble. So think, how can I get that information? Right, and like, probably a lot of you send out community surveys, right? Instead of being like, do you want the stadium or not? Or even maybe more nuanced positional questions, being like, what are the most important things to you about this plot of land? Right, or however you're gonna phrase that up, or when you have community meetings, right? Do like community learning forums, where you have people come and share what you structure the conversation. Because most people do not know the difference between interests and positions, right? You can't say, tell me your interests. That's not gonna work. So you ask questions that like, talk to your neighbor about what you most love about this community. Right, so you're getting them to their core values and things you really matter about. Talk to your neighbor about the things that most concern you about this proposed development. Right, get them thinking at that deeper why level. And you can even ask them like, okay, go a layer deeper, think about why that matters.
And to frame up the conversation so you get people focusing on what really matters. And we're not doing that very often. And this is where all of you are in positions of authority. Use that authority to help people have better conversations and lead to better outcomes. So you can apply this all your life, but think about how do you weave it into all your work.
You notice in both of our situations, it kind of starts out with fear. People are coming because they're afraid, hardly because they don't understand the why. And how do you work through that? And there are people who come to you as a local elected to say, well, this is our principle, you know? And if you have principles, you would believe the same way I believe, right? And it turns into bullying because we're looking for the betterment of everyone in the city, not just one particular group of people, but the bullies tend to be the loudest. And so how we work through that and still calm the fears of the general public, even though there's a loud voice here that is never going to be satisfied, and still get the position or get what we think is in the best interest of our communities. Going forward, we can't get stuck on one person. We have to keep going and recognize that the interest of all, once you have that why answered and the buy-in, I guess is what we see it as local, makes a difference.
Absolutely. That's true. So many things. One thing I do just want to say, like I have been in communities where public officials have been bullied. Right? So like shine the mirror on yourself first. I'm not saying you're all doing this, but shine the mirror on yourself first. Right? Because it's very easy to be like, I'm serving everyone. And you're like, oh no, you're actually just doing the things you want. Right? So do the deep work yourself. Have possibly ask others to do it if you're not going to do it yourself. So I just want to throw that up. I have seen that. And I want to also throw out, like, if you're like, I really am trying to serve the community, recognizing there may be other parts of your community you're not hearing, right? I know this is a huge struggle for communities. How do you get to those parts of the community? But, you know, you just don't assume, but you can even think like, you know, we really aren't hearing from this part of our community. Like, let's at least try to think what might be important to them, or how can we get information on that? And there's a tool that we teach in our longer collaboration course called situation assessment, where you can actually like bring somebody in to just help you hear those different parts of your community. And I'm not getting into that today. I'm happy to share more resources, but there are ways you can hear those different parts of your community, because if it really is your goal to serve your broader community, make sure you're not just hearing certain voices, right? Or falling into your biases. So those are the things I want to throw into that. And then another one is related to exactly what you're saying. Like, if you like, my interest is to serve the best of this community and for the most people, like say that may not go anywhere, right? But I want to remind everyone, our job is to serve this whole community. You all have very strong perspectives on things that matter to you. We want to hear them. You are an important part of our community, and there are a lot of other voices to consider. So I want you to understand as we go forward in making this decision, we are trying to hear those voices and consider them all. And again, your voice is important, right? That's what we need to balance. Valuable tool, yes, and yes, you have an important point, and a lot of other people have important points we need to hear too. And this is a way that we can be, what I like to use the word or the term kind and firm. I'm kind, I'm listening to, I'm trying to understand, and firm that like I have a job to do. And I think often we default to one or the other, and the strike point is in being firm.
On the community surveys, like, well, that's a way a lot of us, if not all of us, try to get information from the broader group. Are you saying maybe make those surveys have a couple of why questions, like a question about what you want and then try to get the why? Is that what you mean?
Well, I have my own perspective. I would actually just stay away from what you even want. I don't think that's useful information.
Yeah.
We always find it's like 80% of people don't want gondola. Well, if there's no other transportation solution, I'm not saying that's the only one. But like, sometimes people don't want something, but they need it, right? It's like the rest of the community.
So
And
the question might be, why do you don't want to, what's your alternative?
well, so just to use that example, right? Some questions, and I haven't thought about these, there's one winging it here, right? But you might say like, you might do a little education, like you may or may not know that the Cottonwood Canyons have experienced extreme congestion due to peak traffic and also summer and like leaf viewing traffic. And like, you know, include a little information, because some people they may be affected by it without even knowing, right? So maybe just a little information, like you can go to this video to learn more. We want to get your perspectives on what you care about and value with the Central Wasatch or whatever, right? So it might be a question like, how do you use Little Cottonwood Canyon? What do you value about Little Cottonwood Canyon? What concerns and challenges have you encountered, right? I mean, and these are embarking on questions here, right? But you're asking those things, and maybe eventually you might get to like, a gondola has been proposed as one way to move people, blah, blah, blah. What are your perspectives on this, right? Or like, you know, sometimes you need to do Likert scale or whatever, but like even doing some interviews with people and then using that to inform a survey that gets sent out to thousands of people, like that's something we often do. So we can say like, people have shared these concerns around the government proposal. Do you share any of these? Right? There's some dots they can click. So there's a way that you can do a more interest-based survey because you talk to people to inform more like quantitatively and analyzable questions. So it really depends, and I'm happy to talk more about how you do this. But again, like if you just start to think in terms of a bunch of positions are probably not going to help me. How could I get some more interest-based information so that we can make nuanced useful information or decisions? Like just thinking that way might really, you might see it infiltrating a lot of what you're doing and shift how you're doing it, not in a radical way, but in a really profound way. Okay, so a few thoughts on this, and I can't emphasize enough how important the shift between interest and focus. I've said this before, I'm going to say it again because it's so important. It's like this is a whole new way of seeing and operating in the world. So I encourage you to like take it seriously and then also be compassionate with yourself. Right? You're gonna go home, if you're not gonna be kids, like, oh, I'm being super positional, like telling them they have to go to bed at 8 o'clock. Right? Maybe that was what got talked about over here. Right? But I want you to understand like you may have very good reasons for that. Right? I'm not saying you should be like, no bedtime, right? I'm not saying that, but be clear about why. Because often one, if you are clear about your interests, right? I know for a lot of my friends who have kids that it's like, I just don't have time to myself. Right? Does it have to be between 8 and 10? Is that even good time? Right? Maybe you're like, my kids really want to go to bed at 9. They don't sleep well until 9 anyway, but I find that time some other time of the day. Right? Could we just hire someone to take the kids from 8 to 9? Like, what are all the things we would do? Right? And it may be, there may be other reasons, but when you get to this interest, you start to realize there's a lot of possible solutions, and maybe the thing you keep pushing isn't working. Right? It's not working. So try something different. But make sure that's rooted in interest. So just be patient with yourself and keep practicing. Big advice. I've already kind of gotten at this, but I really want to drive that home that understanding interest is really like peeling back layers of an onion. Right? Like the kids might be like, oh, my interest was to make mom muffins. Well, actually, my interest was to do something nice for mom. I want to celebrate Mom and Mother's Day. And the closer you get to like the root thing that really matters, the more problem solving space there is. So for example, let's say both of the kids in the story of the orange were like, hey, I want to do something nice for mom. Do you want to do something nice for mom? He's like, ooh, let's cook these things together and let's go in and buy her flowers. Right? All of a sudden you create value because your focus on what really matters. I wanted to mention this earlier. So you want to get to the why, and asking the question why can feel very interrogative. Right? So the ways you can get at this is, how is that important to you? How does that matter? How would that be helpful? What concerns do you have? So also just make sure that, again, we're not kind of making people feel attacked. We're just really trying to understand. Okay, so this one might be kind of provocative for folks, and I want you to really sit with it. If this kind of triggers you, I want you to sit with why. So when we frame things, we often frame them in positional ways, and that tends to lead to a backlash. And that gets in the way of meeting our interests. And I think a really good example of this is the defund the police movement. And I want to acknowledge, I think there are very important interests behind the push for defund the police. I think there are a lot of really important justice concerns, concerns about policing, concerns that affected people that were beyond people of color that need to get addressed. And in saying defund the police, a lot of people heard like, what, you're going to totally defund the police? Like, we were on the police for all this. Like, no, there's no way. Right? Instead of saying like, oh, there are these things that are actually affecting me that we probably should fix, right? Instead of building this, like, there are legitimate concerns we need to address. A lot of times we frame things in these very positional ways, and it leads to people just shutting down, not hearing, not building steps, right? So being really mindful to frame things in a way that focuses on interests, so that you can, could be like, we're pushing for more just policing. Okay, what does that mean? Let's talk about it, right? But when you say defund the police, you think this is what needs to happen. And I promise you that totally defunding the police would not have solved a lot of problems people had, right? Just as like more funding for the police wouldn't solve the problems. So framing around interests is really, really important. And then this is it's kind of woven in everything we've been talking about, but the influence of effective listening. I mean, we get taught like active listening, or I don't know, nod at their chin, or all these different techniques. And I want to really drive home that effective listening, there are techniques that can help you, but it's really about the intention you bring to listening. Actually, Seth mentioned this earlier, and I was like, like basically, I'm going to put words in your mouth. Be like, I just regulated, and then I calmed down, and then I could actually hear what they were saying, right? So this is where I want to go back to when you're dysregulated, you're not in understanding rational brain. You're in like, how do I protect myself brain? And what we need to be is in brain where like, I'm trying to truly understand what matters to this person, even if they don't know how to communicate. Right? You might say to this really angry community member, like, I'm hearing that you're really concerned about how this could affect your property values. Am I hearing that right? No, that's not what I meant. What about, okay, wait, so I want to make sure I'm hearing you correctly. So it sounds like you're just concerned about how it affects the quality of life in your community. Am I hearing that right? And I'm like, yeah, that's the thing, right? And so often that's what happens. It's like we need people to help us even understand for ourselves what really matters. You might have experienced this in your little peers talking to each other, right? And what we can do is offer people that I'm really trying to understand you, and I'm going to try to help you understand better so you can. So a core part of effective listening is actually asking good questions to help you understand, right? And so it can help you understand more why that matters to you, right? This is the survey thing, right? Ask good questions on the survey, but ask them in conversation with your significant other, with your community members, with your other council members, et cetera. And I get it. There's so much I can say about listening. I won't go down the rabbit hole right now. Yeah, I just want to drive home, listening to understand and asking questions to help you understand, right? You're not asking questions to try to look smart. You're not asking questions to try to make them look dumb. You're asking questions because you really want to understand their issue. Okay, so I'm gonna pause there for a second. And we're gonna start to move towards wrapping up in terms of getting you thinking about what, what's resonating with you, what might be helpful to you going forward and others. And before I kind of dig into that, just what's surfacing for folks, questions, observations, ahas, anything like that? Yeah.
So at the beginning, you had us breathe so we could get into this mindset. A lot of times when we're confronted by people who want to increase the conflict, I should say, where do you have the time to breathe?
Yeah, so I want terminology, right? The words we use create the world we see. And I'm not saying you need to do this when you leave today, but I would really encourage you to start thinking of people who want to increase confrontation. Right? So if the conflict is either there or not, there's either a difference of ideas, perspectives, needs, and wants or not. So what they're trying to do is increase the confrontation, right? Those unproductive ways of dealing with conflict. Like I can go on a whole spiel about this, I won't, but I will just say I think when people are doing that because they don't feel powerful. We're trying to feel powerful by being disruptive. We're trying to feel powerful by claiming the room. We're trying to feel powerful. Right? So I just say that because I think that can help us be in this place of curious compassion of like, what's going on for this person? Right? So I think just understanding that that's the conflict is either there or not. And often again, we're dealing with dysregulated humans. There may not even be any conflict. So that part being compassionate with the other of like, they really feel like they need to do this for some reason. That's not helping, but I can just not take it personally. Right, so that can be helpful. Another part of things that I wanted to mention is with the self-regulation, that is a learned skill, right? We can anchor ourselves in a regulated state. Unfortunately, a lot of us are regulated in very dysregulated states right now. And I do talk to a lot of groups where they're like, I've always thought I was such a calm, regulated person, but I'm now realizing that my brain is constantly racing to try to figure out the solution, and I'm not even paying attention to what the person's saying. That's another version of dysregulation, right? I need to figure this out. I need to figure this out. Fine, get guilty of that. Right, so just becoming aware of like what it means to be regulated. I'm here, I'm calm, I'm present. I don't feel like I have to control the situation. I'm just receptive. I'm ready to do. And trying to anchor there and learning the skills to anchor there will make it so somebody can be yelling in your face. And this is what I've trained to do as a facilitator. Like sometimes I get attacked. People are just angry. They want to claim power. And I can sit there and be like, it seems like you have some really strong perspectives about that. I want everyone to understand what those are. Would you be willing to share them with us? No. You yelling at me is not helping us understand. To you. Again, I understand you're upset. Would you like to take a moment? Like, do you need to take a walk? Right? I can stay, and this is not about me. So that's a couple of things there, right? Like learning to just regulate your system and kind of anchor in regulation is something that we need to do a practice. Learning to not take it personally will help you stay regulated, right? Because you're dysregulating because your brain is saying, I'm under attack right now. So as soon as you say like, I'm not. I mean, there may be times where you physically feel unsafe, and I want to say that is totally separate than what I'm talking about right now. Right? Somebody like whips out a gun in a meeting, like you should be concerned about safety. But if somebody's just saying, I don't agree with you, and I think you're a terrible council member, right? And it can be a part of your brain that's like, it's so scary, but this is not a bear in the woods. The most productive, helpful thing I can do right now is just stay unregulated. Right? So those are things that can help. And then again, having compassion with yourself of like, this is advanced humaning skills. So when you like, I'm getting super dysregulated, if you can even just notice that and think, how can I create space for us? Right? Sometimes you can't. Right? So in that moment, just like just don't do anything. If you can't do something, just don't do anything in some ways. And if you can, like a lot when I'm facilitating meetings, if I'm starting to get dysregulated, or others are, I'll say like, I think I actually need to go to the bathroom, so we're just gonna take a 5-minute break. Right? I'll make up some excuse for why we need to take a 5-minute break. And we know from the research that once your amygdala starts firing, for most people, I think it takes about 3 minutes for it to calm down. So make that break 5 minutes. Those are a few tips. I hope that's helpful. But again, it's like, I want everyone to realize these are advanced human skills. And I think they're what's going to be necessary to deal with what's happening in our world.
I think there's a fine balance sometimes on the public comment, executive positions like today. You get the angry mom yelling at you, screaming at you. You know, you take a break there. Are you making the angry mom more angry, right? Or are you gonna calm anybody down and sleep back to them, not to say anything, and just ride through this and then adjust the next time?
Yeah.
Because that's how we ended up doing. Two angry moms. For some issues. So. Because it's not my interest, it's my interest of, like, you know, if I'm showing compassion to the other side, but my people I'm talking about are not seeing that same compassion. Then now you're fighting too much.
Yeah. And I want to be really clear that compassion is not, I agree, yes, you're right? It's just literally like, I want to understand your perspective and your perspective. And these are advanced human skills. That's all I can say. Like, this is why we can't do this in an hour. I can introduce some concept in thinking about it, but there's a lot of nuance and part to this. And I wish we were learning it in K through 12. I mean, how different would the world be? Right? And I've heard some rumor that maybe the governor's working on that as part of his Distribute Better initiative, and that would be amazing. Like, that's like, I op-ed of, like a year ago, that we need to do this. Right? When we have 40, 50-year-old humans like us who are like, I got to rewire my brain, like that's an uphill battle versus like, this is just how you work with other humans, right? So I just want to acknowledge that. And it's a really important point, like at any point in time as a facilitator in conflict, I'm asking, what's the productive thing to do right now? What's the productive thing to do right now? Sometimes you don't know. But sometimes your spider senses are good where you're like, if I take a break right now, people are going to lose it. Right? So in some ways just being like, the most productive thing I can do is just sit right now. So like, why aren't you responding? Saying, you just shared a lot, I need to process that. That's it, right? Your significant other is like super upset and you're like, why are you just sitting there? Oh, I'm trying to process how I'm feeling. Right? Somebody can get mad at you and just be like, that's a really reasonable request. And we won't talk, there's so many little skills we won't talk about, but I'll try to surface some things. And one of those skills is silence, just sitting with something. Right? As a council member, as a person in conversation. And like, we are so afraid of doing that. And more often than not, that serves everybody, that moment to like, let everybody think. And our little amygdala brain just wants to keep like pumping stuff, and when it has to pause, sometimes it's like, I'm being a jerk, right? Sometimes you just let somebody who's been yelling in your face sit for a second, they're like, actually, now that I think about it, you know, they'll do their whatever. So give some of that space, and that in itself might do wonders. Any other thoughts? Yeah.
You brought up earlier at the beginning about how the media, at least the way information is transmitted now, is so much different than it was even like 4 years ago. When newspapers were a thing, like as a politician, you didn't want to be on the newspaper story because your neighbors were picking it up on their porch and going, there's Mayor Walker, what about it? But now the media, the stories last 5 to 7 minutes and then they move on. It's just I guess the question I have of me is, how do we as elected officials deal with this media environment? Because it's so much, you talk about regulating. I mean, you turn on the news and you're dysregulated.
And you are. I mean,
Every campaign promise is, I'm going to go back and fight this, or I'm going to go fight those people. Or
yeah, and there's so much research on all of this, like how you gain power by creating us versus them and all that stuff. And so there's just so much. And I think a big thing, like I am very involved in a lot of local regional things, right? So the news is important to me in some ways, but I stopped just like reading the news. You know, just picking up the newspaper and reading it. It's not helpful to me showing up as a human I want to be in the world and have capacity to help. So just being thoughtful about your time and attention and where you're putting it. Right? And when you get super outraged about something that you actually can't do anything about, you are wasting energy. And you are actually setting yourself up to not serve your family and other people around you well. And so this is kind of like big picture of all this stuff. So I think just being really honest with ourselves about what we're doing with our time and energy is really important. In the terms of like how to speak with the media, I mean, I maybe have to punch that. I think that's a pretty advanced skill set. We got a lot more we have to learn before we can even go there. I think the main thing though is being able to and I don't know how this will work for you. The media is not being very helpful right now. But like whenever I speak to the media, I get interviewed a lot, like I emphasize like these issues are very complex. And they affect a lot of people in a lot of different ways, and we need to consider those different perspectives. And so that's what I'm doing, and that's what you're doing. And just like, instead of being like, I think we need to build a stadium or whatever else it might be easy to say, just saying like, I'm really trying to understand those perspectives. And maybe even like, here's how community can share those perspectives. Right? So if anybody reads this, here's what I want you to know about how you can share your concerns and needs with you. And like thinking, what is the productive message there? And I will tell the media, I will say like, if you write anything about this, I really hope this is what you will emphasize, because this is what I think people need to hear. And they're actually pretty good about it usually. But it's not, you don't make sensational news by saying, this is complex and there's a lot of perspectives on it, right? But we need more people putting that in there. And reminding people what the job of the public official is, right? It's not to take sides and fight, it's to try to take the best good to things, right? Okay, I want to make sure we wrap up on time. Molly, can I get like, 1:15? Okay. So I just want to leave a little nugget here, right? So there's like, this is all the conflict stuff. Like, well, what do you do about it, right? So one is just being competent. And a key thing, as I mentioned, a lot of times we're just dealing with dysregulated humans, or we're dealing with confrontations where there's not any conflict. And I kind of a silly example I give people, because people are like, well, what if you do somebody just punches you? I'm like, you don't have a conflict, you have a confrontation. Right? Do you like have a difference of perspective you need to work for? No, just somebody was angry and they punched you, right? And there might be a conflict. But they're like, if you walk out of a restaurant, somebody just punches you, so there's a confrontation, there was nothing there. Right? Whereas a lot of times we have conflicts that we're not surgically dealing with, right? A difference in ideas, needs, perspectives, and wants that are in tension with each other and not easily reconcilable. So be asking yourself, what really is the conflict? And then how could we find solutions forward? And if you need to reach agreement about courses of action, you're gonna have to negotiate solutions that work well for everybody. If you're gonna get to that mutual gain solution that we got to with our wrestling. So I want to emphasize that we watch hear people like, oh, we collaborate with them. Like, you tell them what to do and you want them to do it. That's not collaborating. I've heard this from not city officials, but county officials. We told the national park to do this and then they didn't do it. They're not collaborating, right? That's not collaboration. Or we collaborate, we get into a room once a month and we talk. That's not collaborating. You could be collaborating, but just doing that's not enough. So collaboration is really comes from the idea to co-labor, right? To work together. And I'm going to build on that, say to work together to make conflict productive. You are collaborating when you're like, we don't see eye to eye on everything, and you're working across that to create mutual gain, innovative, good solutions. And that involves negotiating, or I like to use the word co-creating, right? Because people have a lot of ideas of what negotiation is. So basically, we're working together to create solutions that work well for all parties, i.e. that address their key interests, and that effectively address the issue of mutual concern. Right? We might say, like, we collaborate around the Great Salt Lake. Well, if we didn't figure out how to keep water in the Great Salt Lake, we didn't effectively collaborate, right? We still have to solve the problem. And the thing is, how do you do that in a way that works well for all parties? And a lot of times we're super positional, so we feel like there's no way we could possibly get there. But more often than not, this is especially true in communities like the places you work, having worked in a lot of those places, people have a lot more shared interests than you could ever imagine, or than we tend to think. We're torn apart by our differences because we're being super positional, when actually people care about quality of life and feeling safe and having a place where kids can roam around and feel free. You have this long list of things that people actually really care about. So there's so much I can say about this. We're all getting the like exposure to ideas, training today, not the like deep dive. What I think is really important to understand the context of conflict is that whenever we're dealing with conflict, we can choose how important we think the other parties' outcomes are, how important it is to meet their interests, and how important it is to meet ours. So on the bottom here, we have a level of concern for others' outcomes, right? How concerned am I that you get a good outcome for you? Not that you get your positions met, but that you get your interests addressed. And then on the upper, like the bottom to top axis, you have level of concern for your own outcome. How important is it to you that I get my needs met? A lot of us have tendencies around conflict. How many people in this room would say they have a tendency to avoid conflict? Like, I want this to go away. Right? Probably more than just put their hands up, because we do a lot of avoiders. No judgment, right? Just recognizing in ourselves. Some of us are computers in some environments and avoiders in others. But basically, when you say, like, I don't care who gets what, I just want this to go away, you're probably an avoider. Like, make this thing go away. Like, I don't need a good outcome, I just make it go away. Right? Competing is when you tend to be like, I want to win. Right? I want to win. I don't really care what you get, but I want the best outcome for me. Accommodating is when you're basically like, I just want you to do well, so this goes away. That's how I see, like, basically make this go away. I'm not so worried about me as what you do well. compromising, who in this room would say we need to be better? No judgment. That's the rhetoric on the street. We need to be better compromisers. As you heard, second, I think I have the slide. I don't love the word compromise because that's a connotation of you give up something really important to you. So in this way of thinking, compromise is like, I just want us both to do okay so we can reach agreement, right? No judgment. That's what most of us have been taught is like the way to go. So I want you to think about collaboration as I want you to do super well for yourself, get your interest met. I want to do super well for myself. Let's see what we can create here. We can all get the most for each other. Right? This is again not kumbaya, let's all get along. This is like, let's negotiate the best possible solution so we create the most value possible. And I have my little arrow pointing out there because when you get really good at this, you start to think, oh, and we could do this thing together, and then you could adjust this thing together, and you bricolage, you put stuff together and create these amazing outcomes. So for example, when I negotiated my job at the university, I was negotiating with somebody who teaches this stuff. And we were like, oh, and we could partner with this department, do this thing, get these students, and all of a sudden you got this like, it's a really good agreement for her. It's a really good agreement for me because we were super interest-based and we explored all the possibilities. And like, just when you put people together who are really good at this stuff, it's amazing what they can create. The challenge is most of you are going to be dealing with people who do not know any of this stuff, have been trained totally differently, and you are working against your own brain that has been trained in a lot of ways. And I just want you to be compassionate with that. So you're just thinking about the story of the orange, right? The half an orange is a compromise solution. It's like, this doesn't work. I mean, just like show of hands, who feels super inspired by the idea that you need to compromise? It's not usually very inspiring, right? It's usually kind of like, okay, I guess I just compromise. I know it's just words, but again, the words we use create the world we see. And if all you see is possible compromise, then you're like half of an orange solution. And if you see like, if we communicate effectively, we could have marinated steak and muffins and flowers, super happy mom. Like that's a whole different place. So I like to use the analogy that compromise is like putting hot water and cold water together and you get warm water in the end, right? Versus collaboration is like, ooh, let's take some flour and some bananas and some milk and all of a sudden it's banana bread. So that's my takeaway 4, right? Is that collaboration is not just like being nice, let's just get along. It really is a very pragmatic skill set that is rooted in interest-based negotiation. And again, I'm going to leave you with that dangler because most of us don't get trained in interest-based negotiation. For a lot of people, it sounds very businessy. You are negotiating all day long, whether you know it. The question is whether you're doing so effectively. So again, these are the things that if people are interested in, we can look at going farther into them with this group or getting more resources. Okay, so in a moment, I'm going to just give us a little chance to think about like what's standing out to you and what could this mean for ULCT? Like, are we done after today? We feel good. Do we want to maybe take it farther? You all, communities you serve. But for now, just anything surfacing from.
I think it'd be good to continue it. I think from a league standpoint, a city standpoint, I'd love to see it developed in different angles. Specifically dealing with fellow council members is one type of conflict resolution. And, you know, there's an inherent need to, you know, especially when you're all representing different areas of your city and you do have districts and it's, you know, I have to have what I need because my precinct needs this, you know. And so I think it'd be good to have that from a council aspect, council and mayor, and another from public. And whether that public is just council dealing with the public or council dealing with their own personal public. I think there's some different areas of resolution that function the same, but differently. I mean, I found that conflict resolution is entirely based on trust. And it's not, it's trust in the sense that I have to be able to trust that your desires are justifiable, they're yours, they're real, they're not wrong by nature, we just see differently. And so how do we resolve that conflict between us? Conflict is good, you know, when we said earlier, you know, opportunity, and it's an opportunity to know each other. It's an opportunity to understand and to effectively make change. But it might not be your way. And, you know, that trust is that there might be a better solution that I just don't know about yet. And I'm here to listen. And I take that stance with the public when they come in. I can easily just get offended right off the bat and just go, man, they're here to fight with me. And I've already made a decision. You know, my mind's made up as this is where we're going. But if you open a conversation with, you know, this is public domain, you know, here's your 3 minutes, come up and speak, and they bring up something that you're welcome to entertaining other options. That maybe there's something we didn't know, maybe there's something we didn't vet yet.
That's where I say conflict just is, the question is whether you make it an opportunity. or
Yeah.
not, Right, because it's not necessarily good. It often turns out quite bad, right? But it's not the conflict itself, it's what we're doing that matters. And again, you're talking about like, you get to make that choice.
Yeah.
Yeah, and of course, a lot of other people have no clue that they get to make that choice and they don't have skills to do it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Right?
And I've got that Viktor Frankl quote, like, posted many places throughout, because I've used it throughout, you know, my life. There's a spot, there's that space, and there's always that space between that stimulus, somebody upsetting you or saying something that questioned you, and your response to it.
And do you choose to go upset? That's a choice.
Yeah.
Again, most of us are just default. So I'm going to, I want to put, like time is just falling through my hands. So I want to just kind of like wrap us up here, and I want to get a little bit more thoughts about what this could mean for ULCT. So my final thing here is like how, as we're talking about right now, how we deal with conflict matters. And I have come through studying and working with conflict to see that we have this very common destructive spiral, downward spiral of conflict, where we basically we perceive conflict as a threat. Oh my gosh, last time conflict happened, it was bad. So your system goes into fight, fright, freeze. You start to attack, avoid, accommodate, do these behaviors that don't help. You get that outcomes. And then the next time you encounter conflict, you're like, this is horrible. Last time it happened, it was so bad, right? My partner and I yelled at each other and we're mad for days or whatever. And you create this vicious cycle. And what I want to do, I'm on this mission to help people see that that's a choice. We're making choices that lead to that. And instead of starting from the bottom, we just say, conflict just is. If dealt with productively, it can be actually a huge opportunity. I can grow, we can learn, we can create something new, my community can get that outcome. So you stay regulated, right? It might even be a little uncomfortable, like it's hard to not see eye to eye with people and we have to like work through it, but you stay with it, you behave skillfully, you listen, you negotiate, and then you actually get good outcomes, right? This is what got me on this route, being like, whoa, that was awesome, like good things came out of that. And then you're like, not like seeking conflict, but just the next time you don't see eye to eye with somebody, you're like, what can we create here? What's possible versus like, oh my gosh. Right? It's like a this response versus a this response. And you're still being skillful and you're taking care of yourself. I think it's a whole skill set of like, what if you deal with somebody who just isn't being reasonable? Like you need to be ready to exercise your best option. Right? Sometimes that's saying like, I don't think we can reach agreement here. That's okay. Like it's been fun talking with you, but I gotta take care of myself. Right? You don't have to be a jerk, but you just take care of your needs. Right? If you get into that system, then you just start to get this virtuous cycle. So that's my hope for everyone in the world. And what I hope you take away from this meeting, this little mini training is that conflict just is, right? It's not good, it's not bad, and it can be a huge opportunity to deal with skillfully. So how we deal with it matters, right? And then give this whole idea, if you don't do conflict, it will do you. This is not a choice. None of them in the room knows Brene Brown. She says, if you don't go through vulnerability, it will do you. Same idea, right? It's gonna happen. It's what you're gonna do with it. And is it gonna drive you or are you gonna drive it? So focus on interests, not positions, and try to help other people do so, right? You're not gonna go home and ask your like 17-year-old, like, what are your interests? They won't know. You might say like, well, why is that important to you? Right? Just ask that question. Don't pass go until you're calm and present, right? And a lot of this conflict, it's not actually conflict, it's just dysregulated humans interacting with each other in unproductive ways. And when we need to reach agreement about courses of action, we need to collaborate, right? We need to do the interest-based negotiation. I mean, that's beyond what we're covering here, but I want you just to recognize there is a skill set for that, and it's like very pragmatic, and anyone can learn it, and it's not super duper hard or scary. Okay, so we're really close to time, so I'm gonna ask everyone, don't look at my time here, but I'm gonna ask everybody just to take a minute on your own and think about, like, based on what we've heard today and what you're thinking, like, what are the key challenges you're dealing with? We've heard there's a inter-council conflict, there's conflict with the public. Just like, what are the ways conflict shows up in the work you and other ULCT members are doing your work? And what training or resources or what, whether it's through my program or otherwise, might be helpful to you all at this point in time. So I'm gonna just take a minute on your own. Think about this, jot some ideas. All right, so we had a lot to talk about today. I always like slim down when I'm gonna present. I still run out of time and there's so much. Really great questions, really great insights. Thank you all for that. What I think I want to do just to like harvest the most wisdom out of this group is if it's okay, Molly, could I kind of like a short survey that we would just dump ideas. That way, if you leave today and you're like, oh man, you're having this kind of conflict or I'm seeing this in my community, this would be really helpful. Just have a little time. It will be very short, totally optional, but you can think about what might be helpful. For right now, I'd just love to like, maybe popcorn a few, like, is anything really jumping out? Actually, process. I'd love to see a show of hands. Who feels like some additional training and support for you all and ULCT communities members would be helpful? I know I don't have anything on the line for this, so. Okay, so it sounds like it's gonna be helpful. So we'll send out a survey. We'd love your thoughts on what that could look like. What we propose to ULCT is we don't like to design any intervention until we understand the challenge, like we do diagnostic work before we intervene. So what we want to do if we develop some training partnership, like this is part of our work, but is do a little bit more diagnostic work. Probably do some more survey of the communities that you serve, et cetera. So first up, we'll be just getting a little more information from you, but know that we'd like to just spend a little time understanding the need and like, you know, what would work. Do these need to be virtual? Does it need to be asynchronous? Does it need to be like whatever? How deep, how into this rabbit hole do people want to go? So we will do some exploration.
And let me just add one other piece to that. This has been a fantastic training. And again, as I started the meeting, I thanked everybody for taking more time in person than we normally would do. And we represent 1,500 mayors and council members across the state. And so I wanted to emphasize what you just said of the different learning modules and different ways to connect people. And how do we, as a statewide organization, help equip our members and meet them where they are, both physically and capacity wise to help them. And that's on the elected official side, when several of you are here in your capacities representing the professional staff side. So same thing, what could we do in collaboration to help on the professional staff side too? So we have the budget you just approved has dedicated funds per your direction earlier in the spring. And now we're just trying to figure out the best way to do it. So whether you tell it to us now or in the follow-up survey, we're trying to build this out. Councilmember? Oh,
I was just gonna say that back at one time of the 90 minutes, right? On digest.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. I know, but I'm a little bit slower than the average guy. So I need maybe 3 or 4 times that. But I think I would love to have it on lakeside. I'd love to have it on the city side. So I think more of this and repeated. I mean,
Yeah, you have to hear it more than once. For
Yeah.
to make it.
for some of us, yes.
I would think that we would have, I think what a good thing would be not to have just a session at the conference, but have it as the big group meeting. And then have webinars every quarter, maybe after, where you could follow up and hear it a second and third time. Because then whoever in your city was able to hear it, say, oh, remember, this is the next follow-up. So it's kind of a staged class or per se for people along the way. And you're not just waiting every 6 months to go through a little 1-hour thing, but you don't hear it enough to learn it.
So what I might propose, you know, like how we like to operate is that I think there's a lot of wisdom in this group. You're busy people. What we would probably like to do, and just to pitch this to you, and there'll be more conversation with ULCT, but I would actually like to have someone from my team sit down with a lot of you and do like a little interview. Like, what are you kind of topics are you experiencing? What would be helpful? You know, and some people might have different ideas, right? Like some people might be like, I hear it once and I'm done. Some think, as I personally do, you need to get it in a lot of different ways. And we want to hear all that and then put that together into like a proposal for what training could look like. And the beauty is training can be a lot of things, right? It could be some in-person stuff. It could be some asynchronous online modules. I mean, we've got a lot of tools at our capacity, but we want to make sure that they're going to work for the audiences who are busy people with lots of other things going on in their lives. So I just want to get kind of does that feel like that might be a good approach, is to do some interviews, and then we would design a survey and probably put it out to a much broader audience and say kind of like, here's what we're thinking, this is resonate. Okay, I'm seeing the nodding heads.
So we just had our 6 meetings down in Richfield. Molly was there. And that's a great forum because we have small little classes, people from the communities representing their different communities. And there's a real opportunity to exchange information. And that'd probably be a lot to hit all of the regions for doing that sort of thing. But, you know, if Molly is one of the people that gets the information and shares that, and then we have an online resource, I'm just thinking so that at least these classes that we have in R6, and it's just one evening, and you only have a chance to go to 3 classes, and it's rush, and they're 45 minutes or whatever. But at least to give people a chance to exchange with each other some of the issues that they're facing, and then have you identified as a resource so that maybe something like that could be discussed in the class, and then a more in-depth online module that they could go to if they've really got an issue. Anyway, that's just part of mine, since we just barely have that.
Perfect. Well, again, over time, thank you so much to ULCT and all of you for being interested in this. And I personally, the camera, everything was like a nail, but I think nothing could be more important right now in our world. And I appreciate you all taking the time to show up, learn a little bit, being interested in this. We want to help however. So I will follow up. I think we'll follow up the short survey just to harvest any ideas people have that are kind of coming to mind. On that survey, we'll ask, would you be interested in making this public forum? It's training design. So if you're really excited about it, we might still reach out to you and say, like, we're looking for more diversity of this type. Will you be willing? They'll be sure if we go that route. We'll follow up with ULCT and kind of figure out the next steps. Is there anything else from ULCT where I get off the stage? If you feel like we should wrap up here? Yeah.
Thank you for taking the time to come meet with us. I think this is really helpful. And just to be clear with our board, this is a direction that we would like to prioritize and go.
Yes. Yes. Perfect. Okay, well, thank you all. I hope you take away some actionable things that make your life a little easier and better. And again, please be compassionate with yourself. Like, if you really take this seriously, like, there might be areas where you're like, oh, I have not ever been doing this. It doesn't help us when we start to judge ourselves. So I just really started to plant that, because I work with a lot of audiences where it's world changing, right? But it's also a little kind of scary and different. So my hope is that you're like courageous, go out and practice it, have fun with it, that it's helpful for you, and look forward to some more help.
Thank you very much. That was a fantastic session, Dr. Moore, and we'll be following up. Soon. And thank you, board members, for engaging in a very thoughtful and deliberative way there. We're going to pivot back to the rest of the agenda. And I told Mayor Walker we will be ending on time, so don't you fret about that. So Nick, can you switch back to the agenda?
You were back in charge and I was out. Got a different flight to an NLC meeting.
Something like a conflict we got going here. Right?
There will be conflict.
All right, number 9, we're back to the advocacy update from our staff.
So Justin.
Justin.
Special session. Yep.
All right.
Jacket on.
So to get you all back in fight or flight mode, but so a couple updates. Just to let you know, we're gonna talk a little bit about what we're doing. We're gonna talk about some of the issues we have coming up, and talking about. We're gonna get a lot of your feedback today. So I know you've already done a lot of feedback, but we want a little bit more feedback. So number 1, special session update. Let me start at the top. Sorry, I'm jumping ahead. Special session update. We have not seen the call yet, but we are likely going to see a special session show up next week to deal with IPA, IPP. The bill that passed last year was problematic for so many reasons. They're getting closer to a bill that's going to take away some of the problematic dates, change some of the makeup of some of the committees in that. But we haven't seen bill language, and we haven't seen a call yet.
Will this be an interim day?
But it will most likely be on interim day next week. So next Wednesday, we're likely to see a special session. Whether or not there's anything else on the call, we will see. We've heard some other rumors out there, but that's the one that's been the most concretely, I guess, decided that's going to be on the call. We're waiting to see what else is out there. Yeah, I don't think anything on gravel pits next week. Nothing that exciting, just IPA. LPC, so our next LPC is going to be in August. We won't have any LPCs in July. So a couple of things, the August one, I'm throwing this out there hesitantly, but if there are any resolutions that need to come up, that will be our one and only chance to hear them is in the LPC in August. On the point of resolutions, one of the things that we're looking at, kind of as a preview over the course of the next year, is to take kind of all of the resolutions that we have, and we've got a lot of different resolutions out there, and combine them into kind of one big overall policy platform. So instead of saying, hey, let's go back and look at that resolution from 6 years ago, we have kind of a standard policy platform that would be informed by all these resolutions, but we can just re-up every year and say, we need to tweak these things, or it's been 6 years since we looked at that section. So looking at that, it's going to be a longer term project. It's not something we can do before we get to annual here in a couple of months, but just sort of a preview. That's one of the things we're looking at is, as I mentioned, resolutions. We want to start kind of fading away from that and moving towards a policy platform that we can just update on the regular, and have something more concise and easier to find and look through as we look at what those policies are. Want to talk about future bylaw changes. And this one may sound really exciting, and it's also going to sound strange after we just talked about positions. But one of the things in our bylaws is the positions we take during the legislative session. So if you go look at our bill tracker this session, you look that we have positions. We either support something, we're neutral on something, we oppose something, we have no position on something, or the position is pending. So those are our 5 positions that we have. Then we have another marker there on the bill tracker that gives you kind of our concern level. So it could be hot, it could be work, it could be watch, it could be monitor. Ask all the league staffers what watch and monitor mean, and I'll give you different answers. It's a gut feeling more than anything else. But what we'd like to do is look at changing what our positions are, so that we don't need both a position and then a modifier on the position. One of the big impetuses for this is, if you look at our bill tracker right now from this previous legislative session, you'll notice one of the biggest positions we have is position pending, even though we are far past the session. And that's because we take positions on Monday at LPC, and then session runs through the end of that last week. And we're still negotiating and working on so many bills that our positions are in fact pending on many of those as we try to figure that out. So we will come back with a proposal, but the general idea is take away position pending unless we really need it. And where we say a bill might be neutral, but we're watching it, we may just make watch our official position on that bill. There are bills that we really just do not care that much about, and we're just sort of watching them for situational awareness, and bring something like that over. So we would like to watch or monitor a bill. So we'll come back at our next board meeting and have some proposals for you as to what the positions could look like, and then get your buy-off on that, get some discussion on that. It's not anything we have to fully adopt in the bylaws until we get closer to session, but just giving you a preview that we want to talk about what some of these positions look like. One of the things we've learned from the last couple of sessions is people are really watching our bill tracker. We have a lot of people, both lobbyists and legislators, who come up to us and say, hey, I see you are here on this bill. Tell me more about that. So we'd like to find a way that we can clarify these a little bit more. Because when someone says, hey, I see your watch and position pending, tell me more about that. It seems fairly clear to us, but it's not clear. So that's what that one is about, future bylaw changes. It's just about looking at the positions we have on the bill tracker. That's something that you as a board can do because it's a bylaw change. It's not a constitutional change, so we don't have to take the full membership. But that's what that one is. So if you have thoughts about what positions could look like, anything that would help clarify that, please reach out to me and let me know what your thoughts are on that. Happy to take those. So like, I have lots of thoughts spinning right now.
I'm just wondering if one of those will be like high opposed,
So
moderately.
So no, that is actually, so I don't want to take a lot of time on that one right now, because Mayor Walker wants to get out here on time and everybody else does too. But that is one of the things I actually do want to bring back. So when we meet again, I would like to have a discussion about whether or not something is a high oppose, or if we just use like a hate emoji. I don't know, something that really shows this one's a really big deal, or it's a low oppose. I don't know. We could not care less about this or something. I don't know. But yes, those are exactly the things that I would like to talk about. We don't want to have 20 different positions, but if we can have 6 or 7 positions that are very clear,
For political
that'll help us out.
years, we've stuck things on the list.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody says, are you aware of? That's sort of where, yeah, we're aware of, but we really don't care.
Yeah. And I think that's where watch is going to go. So watch or monitor, whatever it is, we're aware of this. We don't really care.
we're not even neutral on it. We just don't care enough to even take a position, but we are watching it.
It might be helpful too then to put them in their own category instead of just by number and then you say watch or pending or we like, we don't like. This is the watch category. This is the approved.
You can just see what we care about the
And
most,
then,
right?
yeah, and then the ones we care about are at the top and we don't have to scroll through wondering which, going past all the. not that we
All the
care
other
about.
stuff, yeah, absolutely.
I don't know, just a thought.
So the other quick thing on LPC advisory groups, you approved these groups last month. We're having meetings with the Commission on Housing Affordability Advisory Group. So not the actual Commission on Housing Affordability, but there's about 30 individuals who reached out and want to be on the advisory group. That one and the Economic Development and Incentives Group are going to meet this week. We're going to present to them what are the things we're hearing out of the CHA. Some of we'll talk about with you all in just a minute here. And then Grandma Gravel Stormwater UDOT Coordination, we're working through all of those. If you've asked to be on those groups, look for emails this week about when those are going to be happening. But we're moving forward with those. We got a great response from the membership, wanted to be involved with that. And to me, one of the best things is a lot of people that we haven't really heard from before. So as we kind of build our bandwidth and build expertise, we've got either new elected officials or appointed officials who have moved to different cities, have changed roles, or just getting involved. And so increasing our bandwidth and expertise is what we're doing there. So those are moving forward. Appreciate everybody who's reached out and want to be a part of those. Those are going to be, I don't know if fun's the right word, but they're going to be productive as we work through those. So with that, Carson, do you want to talk really quick about the research plan, and then we'll move over to our surveys on Shasta?
Yeah, thanks, Justin. I'll keep this pretty succinct. If you were at LPC last month, I wasn't there, but I was told that Justin gave kind of a quick overview of this. What we're trying to do this year is have a more intentional strategy for interim research projects to make sure that once we get to session, we're prepared on all the topics we need to be. That's always tricky because we don't always know what those topics will be at the end of session, but we as a staff went through all the kind of possible topics, everything on our radar, everything on the interim lists, and said, where do we need more information? Where do we need more data? And so we tried to match those up and then we prioritized that accordingly. So this year, like our top 3 issues that we think are infrastructure, water, parking, housing characteristics. So we've gone through and we've identified how we need to get information and data for that. Some of that will be through surveys, some of that will be through purchasing data from proprietary sources, some of it will be publicly available sources like the Census Bureau or the State Tax Commission. So again, intentionally going through building out the data set so we can have that research, and then we've prioritized it and broken out by timeline to make sure we can at least hit the top priorities we need to and have all that available by the session or by some of it will need to be sooner. So I won't go into too much detail on this, but I just wanted to provide kind of a quick check-in. If you have any questions, I'm happy to ask or happy to respond. But yeah, we're trying to sync up our surveys so that we're not asking you all the same questions all the time. Some of it will be more sampled, some of it will be targeted towards city managers, for example, and then trying to break it out over timelines so you're not getting hit with them all at once. So we might have our land use survey in the fall, and then we might have another priority survey going to elected officials. So just trying to balance it out, making sure we're hitting everything we need to without overwhelming any members and having too much survey fatigue. So that's my quick spiel. Again, we're a little bit short on time, but I'm happy to answer any questions if there's issues your city wants to learn more about, or if there's additional data you want to weigh in on. We're happy to receive that feedback.
Perfect. Thank you, Carson. Yeah, perfect. Thank you, Carson. Thank you, Justin. So I know we've asked a lot from you here. We do have one more survey for you in our final 27 minutes, and it relates to the Commission on Housing Affordability and the UEOC. When we met in May virtually, several of us jumped off the call so we could run upstairs to get to that first UEOC meeting. The UEOC is only meeting quarterly this year. So the last couple of years, they've met every month or every other month. And then they had all sorts of subgroups that reported back to the UEOC. This year, they have a much smaller universe of subgroups. And the biggest one still is the Commission on Housing Affordability, under which there are 4 subgroups. So what we hope to get from you here is tying back to an organizational strategic goal of maximizing our political capital at the Capitol. And it'll also be interesting to do this exercise in light of the workshop we just had, because when we were building the survey over the last few days, we admittedly tweaked it a little bit during that workshop with Professor Ramore, trying to make sure we were asking the questions in a more meaningful way. Yeah. But coming back to that strategic goal, of maximizing political capital of the capital, all of the CHOS subgroups that you see on the screen and that are listed in the memo are underway now. So we have league reps on all 4 of these subgroups, and you can see that in some cases it's 5 people, in other cases it's just 1, but we have a league person in each one, and we've tried to have a diversity of representation from rapid growth communities to resort communities, from city attorneys to former league presidents, as well as league staff. The subgroups have all identified the topics they're going to look at. So whereas even 2 weeks ago, there was a list of like 80 some odd topics, they've now narrowed it down to a handful of topics in each group. So Nick, will you now go to the memo? So the first question we have for the board is just, if there's anyone in your city that wants to be part of the LPC advisory groups in this space, let Justin know immediately, because our advisory groups are starting up this week. And we scheduled the advisory groups after the board meeting, because we're going to ask you a survey here to get some general direction from you as a board, that then we can report back to the advisory group and then roll up our sleeves with the advisory group in a little more detail. Okay. The second thing is what's in this board packet you can share with your cities. So please make sure your city managers and attorneys and others see it as necessary. And then third, the survey, we're going to put on the screen here in a moment, we'll send to you electronically as well as to the other board members, because you may fill it out during this meeting and then as you're driving home realize, oh, well, I should have emphasized that. Or you'll realize I want to go back and talk to the mayor, I want to go back and talk to the council, and you may change it. And that's okay too, because what we hope to accomplish today through this survey is get a sense of the potential impact of these different ideas that have been prioritized. We do not yet have specific language. These are just the topics that have been prioritized, some of which we've brought forward and some of which other stakeholders have brought forward. So Nick, if you scan down to page 2 of the memo, we'll start with CHOS subgroup 1. This is Steve Waldrop and Mike Ostermiller co-chairing it. You can see the league membership they're in. The first meeting of this group was last week. Marissa Lestrini and I were both on it. And you can see listed items 1 through 6, the topics under consideration. That would be the use of having state direction around the use of publicly owned land for housing. So that would be state-owned land, county-owned land, UDOT-owned land, city-owned land, school district-owned land, the point, SITLA, basically everything other than federally owned land, because state can't do much about federally owned land, and let's not even open that door in the final 23 minutes. Bigger conversation that needs to happen, but just not in the next 23 minutes. The second topic is helping quote unquote legacy cities. This is Steve Waldrop's term, but well, we've been pushing for this for a while, of how to help older cities and get first-time home buyers into their older cities. Third is corporate ownership. There's some inconsistency about the data in the state of Utah. We've heard anything from 18 to 30% of all of the residential purchases in 2023 went to corporate owners in the state. But even that data, we're still trying to do either 18 to 30, depending on your data source, and then even depending on your definition of corporation. Number 4, making it easier for cities to regulate short-term rentals. Another item that we've been pushing for several years. And then number 5, Nick, are you switching over to the survey? Is that what you're doing?
I'm trying to make Carson a panelist.
Great. Yeah, so go ahead, Mayor Walker, while I switch.
So at my council meeting last week, we had a subdivision plat come in or to approve. It was single family, all of them, it's like 32 homes. And I asked the developer, would you be willing to put in your development agreement that these have to be sold, they can't be rented? And he was just stymied by that question. And he was like, I don't know if we would or not. I said, no, interesting, because I think you should be willing to, but anyway, talking about the governor's push for home ownership. I don't think they intended to rent these, but I think when I suggested that we require they not rent them, it's very interesting to see his reaction. Because it was we'll see how it goes further, but right.
Yeah.
It was just interesting because they were like, well, maybe not, kind of.
Well, and Mayor, this actually gets into CHOS subgroup 2. The last 2 items were reviewing last year's bills for technical improvements and trying to tackle condos, which we've brought up for years. CHOS subgroup 2 is focused on land use. And 2A, tools to incentivize and enforce owner-occupied housing units, gets to the exact point you were making. The first meeting of this group will occur tomorrow. Forum Councilmember Tom McDonald and then Chris Candrulis from Homes with co-chairs there. And you can see that the Property Rights Coalition, the PRC, has brought up that they want state law to expedite process for reviewing quote unquote identical plans. So if you have the same unit being built here and the same unit being built here, is there a way to expedite those? State law right now already says a city should reduce the fees related to identical units, but it's actually quite ambiguous in the code. External ADUs by right, potential modifications to the role of public comment in administrative land use actions. This is very similar to what we went through with subdivisions a couple years ago, and we proposed making some changes there. Having some state standards around garages and parking minimums and planning. And then this is their big kahuna that they brought up the last couple of years, but just a state upzoning, like you've seen in other states. And we pushed back immediately on that one, even though the official first meeting hasn't even happened yet, but we were pushing back on that one. And then you can see the items that we brought up. Now, I'm not going to go through every item in the memo because it's there, and we urge you to take a look at the memo if you haven't yet, and feel free to share it with your city. What we do need to know from you today is just at a first blush, how these types of proposals, both some of the ones that we've proposed as a league and those that have been proposed by other stakeholders, what kind of impact would they have in your community? Would they be high impact, medium impact, low impact? Because that'll help us as we sit down at the advisory group later this week. And then Marissa Silvestrini goes to represent you in the CHA subgroups to have a sense of where the members are at. So Carson, did you press send on the Qualtrics link? So everyone should have it in your email right now at the top of your email. We're just going to give you a couple minutes to.
I'll respond later.
Yep, give you a couple minutes to fill it out right now. Because we thought if we gave you a chance to do it now, as you're looking at the questions, you can ask us any additional contextual questions. And we can answer them. And again, it's in your email, so you can look at it later. So Carson, anything else you want to add about the survey as they're filling it out?
I'll just say, I responded to Nick's email thread, so it should be on there at the top of your email. Yeah, some of these are, we tried to word them as artfully as we could, but some of these topics are still, like you said, a little bit ambiguous. So there's room for interpretation on some of them. We're asking you just to assess like total magnitude of impact. So it might be impact in a good way, it might be impact in a negative way, but we just want to know what things are most impactful and meaningful to your community.
Can everything be a high impact?
Sure. Yeah.
A high, high low.
Yeah, everything could be a high impact, everything could be a low impact. Gotta get this.
So we'll give you guys just a couple minutes here to review it. It should be in your email. And they're broken down by CHA subgroups. And then Nick, will you slide down past CHA subgroup 4 to land use task force? So you'll see in your survey, questions around CHA subgroups 1, 2, and 4. And then within land use task force, these are actually 2 items that we've brought up that we'd like to address around extending timelines and consequences for applicants who repeatedly submit and fail multiple plan reviews and inspections, as well as revisiting some of the design standard preemptions, because we've heard from some cities that it would actually make it easier in a rezoning process if we had a better ability to regulate what the community would look like. So questions as you're filling it out?
Yeah, I'm mentally probably used to answering these questions in a phrasing of support, not support.
Yeah.
So like for some of them, like this is a big deal to me, it would affect us, so I put high impact on the next one. I hate this one, it would have a high impact. Is that okay?
Yep.
Am I interpreting
Yep.
high impact the same way?
Yes, that's what we were trying to go toward is, and it's in a way tells what Justin was talking about of we don't like it, but it's a low priority versus, we really hate this or we really like it. So we're trying to get that sense of potential impact to then inform our negotiations over the next couple of months.
We have policy resolutions on some of these or previous LPC guidance to tell us like oppose or support. Again, we're just looking for like, are these big deals or not? Because something we might dislike, but it might not have a real tangible impact on your communities. Or some things we might like, but it's pretty peripheral to municipal government. So we're just trying to get that magnitude scope. So we haven't really evaluated that as much in the past.
And just to tag one thing onto that, sometimes something is a really, really big deal to one or two communities, and that's helpful to know as we're working through it. Sometimes we'll hear about a thing a lot, but it's because that community tells us about it a lot, and then it turns out nobody else really cares about it too much. So this helps us understand the landscape. So yeah, be really honest, prioritize these things, you know, where you really care about them.
Our impact can be positive or negative.
Sure.
When we're
Yes.
pushing
Yep.
it,
Yes,
say
absolutely.
what the impact is. Okay.
Yep.
I mean, I look at just the whole idea about the short-term rental. I mean, we have a high number of those things. We could have it
Right.
Right.
But that's
because the number of houses, you know, in the median, right? So.
But that's where ultimately you may decide, you know, this is actually a pretty low impact thing in our community. That's helpful for us to know as we get into it. Or you may say, no, this is still a high impact. Great. Part of it is helping us know for which communities, and short-term rentals actually is a perfect one. So let me just kind of articulate how this all fits together. There have been discussions at the Capitol before, where they've said, okay, well, what if we made it a little easier for cities to regulate short-term rentals over here? But in exchange, the whole state gets upzoned over here, right? Well, if we know that, like, we know where our folks are on both of those in terms of the impact, then it helps our negotiators be able to walk in this meeting and say, no, absolutely not. Or, yeah, actually, we're open to that conversation because that's what people have told us. So again, this is the kind of the first foray with these questions, and then we'll be meeting with the advisory group in a couple of days to do a little deeper dive, and that's where we welcome any board participation there, or if you want to volunteer anyone in your city to participate in the advisory group on the job, we'll be meeting on Wednesday, and it's all virtual.
Like the one for ADUs, if you've already got an ordinance dealing with.
Yeah,
Addressing that.
maybe
that's all.
Yeah, that's not a big impact for you, yeah.
So just on the one up on the residential units, by 1 to 4 units per acre, you mean we already have a zoning for 8 per acre? Does this, you talking?
You would go up-
That would now become 11, 10 to 12, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yep, exactly.
That's how I'm reading it.
Yeah, that's exactly, yeah, so whatever you have now, it would be plus 1 to 4 on that.
So if we already have something.
Yeah.
Then that's
I mean,
lower
That's a
impact,
low impact for you, exactly. Yeah.
unless they changed it from what we have.
Unless they change it significantly. Yeah.
Okay.
And again, to reiterate what Cam said, none of this is gonna make a bill one way or the other. This helps us as we're going to the discussions, meeting at the advisory groups. We've got months and months to ask you plenty more survey questions if we find out, you know, are we talking STRs for ADUs or something? You know, we'll come back and ask that very specific question. So again, I also don't want to overinflate that. As you answer now, you are locked in forever. There's plenty of time.
Well, we'll probably leave this link up until a while. We're gonna use the same link for for our advisory group. So if you want to go back and update your answers, or if you want more time to think about it, or you're like, oh, I wish I'd responded to this differently, feel free to go back and submit another response. We'll just take the most recent one with your name associated with it.
Yeah, and it's same thing. If you go back and talk to someone else in your city and they say, what do you mean that's not a low impact, or that's not a high impact? That's a huge impact. Then yeah, change your answer. That's fine. No worries.
So we'll go till 1:50, just kind of this format, and then we'll hit through the last few items, so we're done at 2. But any other questions about the survey or questions about the subgroups? Who's representing the league on the subgroups or the topics that are under consideration right now? Any other questions from board members?
Just from our perspective, I'm going to reach out to Andrew Johnson and Angela to see if we want to know some Salt Lake City.
We've got, Angela sent me a list of everybody from Salt Lake, so yeah,
Okay, great. And I
Salt Lake is covered on every committee.
Okay, good. Okay.
And we've got the ones you emailed me about. I've got
Yeah, okay, great, good, thank you.
This whole state action always makes me wonder what I'm saying. I agree.
And like I said, you're not buying up on any
Yes,
time
I
frame right
know.
now. It's general concept.
But we felt like it was really important today to make sure you walked out of this meeting, if nothing else, knowing what's just on the list. And then who's representing the league in these different entities. And we've tried to have a blend of elected officials and staff in these different groups. And then again, if you personally want to be on an advisory group, let us know. Or if there's someone in your city or in your region, and, Councilmember Winch and Mayor Ryan, I'm looking, the two of you there, there may not be anybody in Torrey who you could volunteer to be on the group. But if between the two of you, you felt comfortable with someone in your region, making sure that perspective is in one of these subgroups, we're all ears. Let us know. Every meeting is virtual at the advisory groups. Okay, it's now 1:50. Any final questions on the survey? We'll leave it open as we finish the agenda, but any final questions there? Okay, so in that case, Mayor, will just finish up advocacy. So on the advocacy, you'll also notice on the agenda here, an item, we just walked through CHA items 1 through 5. Number 6 is a little different animal. It's Weaver County Council of Governments. One interesting situation we ever know is we don't have anyone from Weaver County on the league board. That area is represented by Davis and Weaver County. So Mayor Tran represents Weaver County, Mayor Shepherd and Councilmember Bradshaw represent Weaver County. But we don't have an elected official from within Weaver County on the board. And Weaver County, last year during the session, it became clear, was the center of attention politically around housing. It almost didn't matter what was happening in northern Utah County or Cache Valley or Washington County. It mattered what was going on in Weaver County. So since the end of the session, I've had several meetings with the Weaver County COG, and Harrisville Mayor Michelle Tate has put together a housing group that we've described it as Mayor's Driven, League Supported, where we are helping them put together like a housing Q&A process with a bunch of elected officials in Weaver County to help them understand what they can and what they can do in their area, and making sure they're aware of just the political attention on their area. So I just wanted to make the board aware that we're spending a significant amount of time with the cities in Weaver County right now, trying to understand their challenges and then also to help them tackle those challenges. The other two quick updates to make you aware on the transportation utility fee and homelessness. I'll let Molly do homelessness here in a moment, but on the transportation utility fee, as you know, House Bill 367 failed this past session, and cities are going through budget season right now. We're aware of a handful of cities that are considering starting the process around transportation utility fees. We're also aware of at least one city that is starting the process for a police fee, which was in House Bill 367 as something that would have been limited under that bill. Now that city has a unique circumstance legally, but I've met with that mayor and their city manager and others to advise them of what the safe harbor is and is not from House Bill 367. But we also know there are some big stakeholders out there that we've talked about before who are looking to potentially sue cities over user fees. And we're aware of several bill files that are already open to preempt transportation utility fees and potentially curtail fee authority in general. So stay tuned. That's why we've tried to be vigilant, urging cities to stay in that safe harbor, because it could just take one spark to light the flame of a much larger battle over fee authority at the Capitol. Molly, can you just take 60 seconds, give an update on homelessness and recognizing that I miswrote the bill number?
All good. So, homeless policy update and funding. So there was a lot of funding to homelessness last year. I forget the exact dollar amount off the top of my head. I apologize. I will get it to you in our follow-up. But at HB 298 passed, which reconstituted the State Homeless Services Board, it met once to go over service provider funding. They're going to meet again on the 24th to go over the mitigation fund dollars. As a part of that as well, it created the Shelter City Advisory Board. That group has now met twice. It will meet again. That has been helpful. As far as other policy updates going on, all counties of the first and second class are working on their winter response plans. As all have noted, there needs a better long-term solution for this. And as we were negotiating this policy, it was never really intended that this was the long-term solution. It was meant as more of a parlay to make sure that we have winter plans as needed until something could come online. And it looks like that will be happening with the funding that was secured this last year. OHS is looking at constructing an 800-bed facility in the Salt Lake Valley. There are still not a lot of public details about it as it is dealing with plans, purchasing real estate. So we'll keep you updated as we know more with that. But just know that OHS is looking at a long-term solution that would include emergency shelter, but also step-down services like mental and behavioral health, some housing, some other kind of wraparound services to go along with that. So more of a broader campus to provide assistance for folks.
Perfect. Thank you, Molly. The last thing, just to wrap up on the advocacy side, is we've shown you the list of items that were prioritized in the first round at the CHA. Interim committees are still going, the UEOC is still going, and there are still a lot of concerning topics out there. For example, those of you who are municipal power cities, all municipal power cities, one of the items that got a lot of attention last week, but didn't ultimately get prioritized in this first round at the CHA, was around the difference in fees from cities that are Rocky Mountain Power cities versus cities that are municipal power cities, and wanting some uniformity or some sort of regulatory body over municipal power cities. We pushed back hard on that right out of the gate. Again, it didn't get prioritized, but just gives you a sense of all the other topics that are still out there. Likewise, one of the comments that was made in two of the comments that were made in those meetings, one was cities have this was an exact quote, a zoning chokehold over housing. And then the second exact quote was, we understand that the league doesn't like one size misfits all, but we also should not be silly with local regulations and allowing local governments with those regulations.
Chokehold?
Yeah, chokehold is the exact
Good
term.
moment.
Yeah, so it gives you a sense of what's out there, and it's.
You want a chokehold?
Yeah. So anyway, your survey response will be very helpful, and let us know if you or others interested want to be in those advisory groups. In the executive director report, Molly, can you just give a quick update on the regional summits that are almost wrapped up?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So we've done 4 of our regional summits throughout the state. This was an effort for us to get out to members that might have a more difficult time getting to us. So far we have had events in Price for Southeastern. We attended the R6 event. Somewhere there, it was great. Then we had Fife County in Cedar, and then last week we had the Bear River event up in Brigham City. Soon, at the end of the month, we'll go to Uinta Basin for a luncheon there, and then we are working on events with WFRC and MAG. Those will be focused on just the LAA communities, so those small local administrative advisory.
Invited to those two or just me?
So everyone is invited to everything. So when we've been promoting these events, we are essentially taking our directory of everyone in the region and saying, come on over. So with that, I was really excited by this. We reached about 102 municipalities came to those 4 events in total. Or we interacted with them in total, pardon me. 91 attended the events, and then Meg, Liam, and I, as we were driving through all of them, were able to stop by 19 city and town halls of folks who had not interacted with the league lately. So we were able to drop off a little packet of goodie bags, see if we could help them with anything, just connect with their staff. So from a member engagement, we interacted with 102 cities through those 4 events and the transportation between them. And then just some quick stats, of those who attended, just under half, so about 47 of those communities hadn't attended mid-year or annual in at least 2 years. So about half of those are folks that we aren't typically interacting with. And then it was about a decent spread for who else was attending otherwise. But overall, we had about 450 people attend across all of those events, and I think they were very successful.
Perfect. Thank you, Molly and team. I've made it to 3 of the 4, and Molly and team were at all 4. So thank you to everybody who participated there. And Cassidy, at our last board meeting, said we're trying to start these op-eds in Utah policy, and that'll be part of the follow-up email too, right?
Part of the follow-up email. So I gave you a few different assignments. If you haven't looked at them yet,
you should look them over. So one day you're not surprised by an email that says, hey, here's a draft of your op-ed. What would you like to include? So make sure you're okay with your assignment, or if there's something else you're passionate about and want to do an op-ed on, let me know. We can be flexible.
That was in our follow-up email from the last board.
Yeah, but we can include it in this. We can include it in this one as well.
Yeah.
We'll do that.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you, Cassidy. That's also trying to tell the story of cities and targeting the audience of Utah policy readers who are, politicos and policymakers. The other thing we tried to do at our May board meeting, but we had the technical difficulties, is just reschedule the September board meeting because we have the opportunity to do the baseball game as part of the board meeting, or excuse me, as part of the conference. So right now, pull out your schedules. We're just going to quickly schedule that September meeting while we're all here, and this will be our last item. So really the three options are, we can hold it on, so the annual convention is Wednesday, Thursday. So not Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Wednesday, Thursday. 2 full days right after Labor Day, so it'd be September 4th and 5th. We would normally do the board meeting right after the Wednesday programming, but we have the chance to take league attendees to the baseball game. First pitch is at 6:30. So we can still do the board meeting that Wednesday. We finish programming at 5. We could do a board meeting and just go late to the baseball game. Okay, so that's option 1. Option 2 would be do the board meeting the day before on the Tuesdays. It's the Tuesday right after Labor Day, but a third of you have council meetings on Tuesdays. So the thought was, if we did that, probably better just to make it a virtual meeting because people will be coming down, when either Tuesday night or Wednesday morning anyway. So option 1 is we just squeeze in the board meeting on the Wednesday in between the end of the conference programming and the baseball game, and maybe go late to the baseball game. Option 2 would be a lunch meeting on Tuesday, and we could make it a hybrid. Option 3 would be a Zoom only meeting on the morning of Tuesday the 3rd, so it didn't conflict with council meetings that a third of you have that Tuesday. So those are 3 options. We're just going to do a quick show of hands of the remaining board members, and then we'll need to follow up with Mayor Kafusi when she gets back in town. That will update the calendar invite. So quick show of hands for the option of Wednesday in between the end of the conference programming and the baseball game.
Can we vote multiple times?
You can vote multiple times. That's fine. We're just trying to get some availability here. So
Hold them high, hold them high.
okay, Nick, write them down.
All right.
And don't lose that paper. Option 2, lunch hour on the Tuesday. So Tuesday, September 3rd, lunch hour. Yeah, it'll be a hybrid. It'll be a hybrid. So that we could feed people lunch if they're here, or we could do a hybrid. So 1, 2, 3. Okay. And then option 3 would be, hybrid, which probably realistically be all Zoom Tuesday morning. Okay, so it looks like Tuesday morning's the least, so basically lunch or the Wednesday. Perfect. We'll follow up with Mayor Kafusi when she gets back in town and update the calendar invite accordingly. As a reminder, when we next meet in August, it will be at Provo City Hall, as we try to have a board meeting in each presidential city. And so we'll be there in August. It'll be a hybrid meeting. So those who can't make it to Provo can participate remotely. And then we plan to bring league staff en masse to Provo City Hall, Isaac. The final reminder that when we next meet in August, the deadline to reapply for the league board will have passed. So if your term is up on the league board, let us know if you're interested in reapplying. If you're not interested in reapplying, or if your term is continuing and you want to serve on the nominations committee, let us know. In your packet, it shows whose terms are up. In the last few years, we've had about 4 times the number of applicants as we've had spots, which is a good problem to have. But it's also why we'd welcome participation in the nominations committee, which will have a couple of virtual meetings in August and then finalize their business on day 1 of convention.
Who's over the nominations, Troy?
No, Councilmember Bradshaw
Oh, yeah.
is in charge of nominations.
Just quick, are there term limits?
Crappy job.
Yeah, the terms are 2 years, but people can be on for multiple terms. Yep.
Yeah.
And I have heard from some who would like to serve on the nominations committee. If you are interested in serving on the nominations committee, just shoot me an email and let me know.
Perfect. Then last but not least, in Friday Facts, we mentioned regional recreation councils. We need volunteers from across the state for these councils. So if you have anybody in your city who'd be interested, this would actually report to the Outdoor Adventure Commission, so let us know. But as you can tell, Even though it's summertime, it's busy, but we really appreciate all your time. And Mayor Walker, we're 4 minutes over, but Donnie took a 6-minute break instead of a 2-minute break. So,
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second.
All in favor of adjournment, say aye. Aye. Opposed? We are adjourned.
Thank you, everyone.
Oppose you.